Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Catchup Railramblings. Yes. Um... your eyes do not deceive you. The title is, a little bit combined, but then again, so is what's going on. So not only are we going to have the Railroader server be up and available for those that like to partake in it. And I also the inability to do catch-up ramblings on Friday. I have decided to do the dubious idea of combining the two decide to combine the two different things. So, yeah, this is gonna be a bit of a weird one. But if everything goes all right, it should be relatively straightforward to actually keep everything ticking along quite nicely, all being well. Hello, Montana. Nice to see you. I'm just getting everything set. I've got to do two things at once now, and then I've got to set up. It'll also lead to a somewhat interesting panel. As I don't know, because we will have the usual Ramblings members, but we might also have the Railroader Ops team for this session also able to help me answer the questions, which is no bad thing. So, without further ado, let me just actually get the Discord audience in, and we'll get cracking. Okay, so number 90 is back at... Yeah, she's back up here. Waiting for the coal to be ready. I think... We're waiting on some repair parts. And other bits and bobs. I need to figure out where I am on Railroader before I get into the questions. Just give myself something to actually do. While I
So
wait.
apparently, from what I've been told, they actually went through all the questions that were missed the other day when they continued.
Oh, you're kidding?
Nope.
Really? Like, really?
That's what I was told by Moe.
What's the bloody point of catch-up ramblings then?
You told them to keep going.
I did, but that didn't mean. Oh, for the love of fucking Jesus Christ, not a bike. Well,
I don't know if they got all of them, but I know they got at least 31 of them. Admittedly, I know who those questions were by, but hey.
Oh, for the love of Christ. Oh, that's not ideal. Well, let me just... I know what I'm doing, actually, because I've got to sort this mess out that has somehow happened. And if I'm not mistaken, it's probably because... Let me guess. How did she end up here? Was she just allowed to roll? clearly. But anyway, let me just have a look at questions and see. Okay, so let me just bring up Poseidon, who is obviously part of the Railroad Ops crew. So, like I said, the audience, the panel today will not only be the usual panel, but will also include the current Railroad Ops crew. So, we're not.
And me because I feel like it.
Yes, and you because you feel like it. But this is not very.
Not so much because I felt like it, but because I
and...
literally just saw the icon say "Fleet Catchup Railramblings." I figured, why the hell not?
Can we please fix the? Thank you. Oh, good lord, she's rolling.
What happened?
I don't know. All I know is number one's got the Alaka fuel car attached and somehow rolled all the way down till its head derailed. Luckily, she didn't come off the rails.
I was in the middle of moving the cars there when your closest were down last time.
Yes, but why didn't you slam the brakes on? I said
it disconnected before I hit the brakes.
So what, are you streaming on YouTube or something?
Yes.
Oh. Because...
Yeah, let me just put it on AI quickly, just so I can look at the questions.
I mean, your little text chat isn't really so much questions, more so updates on what they're doing over there. On their side of the game.
Oh. Oh, what are they... okay, so where's the... So I know I have the... If I go to myself and drag it to the ends, I can find the...
That's what I'm waiting for. When are we getting questions?
I'm just looking. Would you please keep your hair on?
How do you doing there?
Just... angry fleet noises.
Yeah, I've got more hair to lose than you, just so you know.
You sure about that?
Positive. Just luscious locks flowing in the wind. And then when I get angry, they turn blonde.
That...
Like this
You are not...
aura around
You
me.
are not a Saiyan. You are not a Saiyan. Don't even try.
Can be if I want to.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
If I get really angry, I can have the same aura, but there's electric sparks around me.
Oh, for the love of Mike. What do you... What do you mean, when will Fleet get proper steam power in this game? We've got it. We've got a 210-0 and an Atlantic and a pair of 460s and a consolidation. Like, we are not short on decently powerful... No, what? No, what? What are you...
I've heard of... I'm talking to Wellesley. Yeah, I've heard of Project
I'm going to...
Better,
I'm going to yeet you off a 5-story cliff.
I'm answering the questions here.
Okay, so, okay. Oh my god. Oh, okay, so some of them were answered, some of them weren't. Okay, so I suppose this is technically my... And since the YouTube audience didn't also hear the answers to the questions, so we do actually have some questions to work through.
Okay, so... How many parallels can I draw between Project Zomboid and State
Do you
of Decay?
mind?
Because
I'm trying to...
Two... No, not really, no.
This is my meta, I swear to...
Fleet, as soon as you open this up to have including Railroader, it's going to cause problems.
Well, I have no choice. I have to do both. I can't exactly... Because on Thursday, there's also Thursday's... Oh, good lord, I've forgotten to record Thursday's video. Whoops, I think I figured out that...
Thursday. Today's Wednesday.
Yes, but I still haven't recorded Thursday's video.
So, Wellesley...
Thoughts on
like a real-life diary or an in-game diary?
Better, would you kindly take this conversation elsewhere?
Hey, this is a conversation that's happening in your chat as well.
I don't
okay?
give a monkey's uncle.
Yes, you do, actually, because you've explicitly told me in Foxo to communicate with the chat before previously, so you clearly at least do have some care.
Yes, I do, but not... Meta's not you and Foxo. Look, anyway, can I... Yeah,
that
doesn't necessarily imply competence. Anyway.
Oh, in-game. Okay.
Thoughts on the Constellation FFG, and do you think it's a downgrade of FREM and a worse frigate than the Type 31, Type 26 frigates in terms of capabilities? Do you think the FREM is what NFR 90 is supposed to be? I am not cyclic. I presume he also had a crack at this question, and probably did it far better than I did.
And don't drag him in here, because I just get depressed.
Why?
Because the last time he did, he came in like a sledgehammer, and he was just fucking insufferable.
Okay!
Yep, I'm glad that is an opinion that is apparently shared by more than a few people.
I don't see that. I just see him as fairly level-headed and doesn't.
Oh, I've heard that from a good few people.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Cyclic is excellent in his knowledge base.
Excellence in his knowledge base, not excellence in his subtlety.
But he doesn't have to be.
He
helps.
really does. Yeah.
Not particularly.
Yeah. So you're outnumbered in this particular opinion, right?
Well, that's fine. An opinion doesn't have to be held by the many to be correct. What do you...
Have it switch for you.
Why did you do that?
Because it goes in here.
Yes, so does the... Oh, that's right, it's this...
Yeah, but that one goes in front of it.
Oh, yeah, this is... Can I leave you with this? I need to go and do something else real quick.
Yeah.
Good. Don't mess up, otherwise...
See, I can't see the
your
stream,
dreams.
so I'm going to assume that was like an if I fit, I sit situation.
Not quite. What we're talking about.
Any bets on Fleet getting very confused between the two things currently going on?
No, I'm pretty good. But like I say, in regards
pretty
to the Constellation class and its comparison to other frigates and FREM, I just say wait and see. They're not in service yet. They haven't had a chance to prove themselves. We have stats and data sheets, and that's all we have. My thought process would be wait and see.
I reckon if I could take you up on it, I'll bet you 20 quid.
Do you think the Mark 42 5-inch 54 gun has a quicker rate of fire minimum than the twin 5-inch 38 Mark 38? Even though the Mark 42 is a single gun mount, that it is faster than the twin guns? Well, yes, because it's an auto-loading...
You've skipped a lot of questions here.
No, I haven't.
Yes, you have.
Nope.
Okay, Dragon,
Oh,
what
shit.
questions has he skipped?
Oh, yeah.
You missed an entire page of questions.
Wow.
It's fine. Right. Well, the first one on that page, I don't fucking know what that is. What was the thought process on the UU-125 Sea Lance? Why does it have at least 35 nautical range, significantly more than the VLA? Why didn't US subs have any long-range standoff ASW weapon? Would the USN develop or deploy this kind of standoff ASW weapon in the future? I am going to be totally real with whoever asked this question. That is just...
Gunnery officer.
That's so outside my wheelhouse. I wouldn't even know where to start on
Right,
that
Fleet.
one.
Usually, if it has Q and then a number, it's more than likely gunnery officer.
Yeah, I
Good,
don't
that's
have
how
the
they
channel,
do them.
and I already know, it's gunnery officer.
Okay, so ask Cyclic, but be prepared for him to tell you, I can't give you any information about it.
Yeah,
because I'm not
probably.
allowed to.
Yeah, that's probably what he'll say. And at that point, anything that anyone else... at that point, there's really no point going into it, because anything we say can and will most likely be proven thoroughly wrong.
A very unsubtle and very annoying way.
What's the reason behind the Abrams still having the L44-120 instead of the longer L55-120? And what's the difference between the M256 and the Rheinmetall 120? Tell you the honest truth, I have no idea. But I would suspect...
I suspect the Sabre would shatter.
Yeah, and to be blunt, I also suspect it... Does the US tank really benefit from changing the gun? I personally don't see it.
Potentially, yes. There's a reason why they were looking at other guns for a number of Abrams testing beds.
Right. And the answer is essentially going from an L44 to an L50 plus, as Rheinmetall and the British have learned the hard way, you can't use rounds like the M33. You because of the higher velocity and higher pressure of the gun, they have a habit of shattering on impact.
Well, there you are then.
So
There's
you need
the...
new ammunition. And the Americans have been, the 44 good enough, they don't need a higher velocity, higher bending round.
Yeah, this is
Their
that's...
current round ends everything. Because you have to remember that the Rheinmetall L50 pluses and the 60 pluses were all a response to the Armata, and we now know that the claim's not that big of bullshit.
So, from what I can find also on the difference between the M256 and the Rheinmetall RH120 is there isn't a difference. They are the M256 is a license-built version of the RH120 L44 in particular.
Yeah.
The only difference is it uses an American mounting cradle and recoil.
Yeah,
But overall, the gun
surprising.
itself is just straight up the same gun.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there is the L55, which is I think where this is coming from, because the L55 has been retrofitted into German and Dutch Leopard 2s, as well as the Spanish ones. It also was one of the test beds for the British Challenger 3 program, but it was deemed not necessarily that useful.
Yeah. It's a case of there's nothing really exists currently you need the higher bending round for.
Yeah. Besides, the tank's role, despite, yes, fighting other tanks being a major part of it, they still have their role of blowing up things that are not tanks. And you don't need a longer barrel for that.
I mean, you do.
A longer barrel does help.
A longer barrel is effective. And one thing that wars have been telling us is the Gulf War, tanks can now engage at around 3 to 4 kilometers now. They have the sensors to do it, the limit's the gun.
Next question. How would you rebuild the Spanish Navy after the Civil War? Well... that's,
Have fun.
Difficulty.
well, there's the lack of infrastructure, the lack of money, to deal with first. There's also, I don't know...
The lack of desire to do so.
Yeah, the lack of desire to do so, and also the fact that anyone you might contract with for new vessels, I don't know, just got themselves into an actual full-on shooting war.
But they haven't yet, necessarily.
Dragon, we're talking months to get a new ship ordered, laid down, commissioned, completed. It's not happening!
Oh no! I'm not saying they'll get them, but they at least would have an opportunity to try and go, hey, can we order this vessel? And it's a case of, probably not. Well, probably, yes, we can do so. Wartime. Nope, you're not getting it after all.
Honestly, your best bet is to conserve what assets you currently possess, and also keep on the best of the auxiliaries that you converted during the Civil War. So the best merchant auxiliaries, keep on the best of them. Conserve your cruisers as best you can, upgrade them as best you can, and basically wait for the early to mid-Cold War period to start fully regenerating the Navy. Because in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, there's not the money or the infrastructure to do much of anything else. Genuinely. It's rough, but that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, sort of. You don't rebuild the Navy, you rebuild the merchant Navy.
Yeah, and this is why I say you only keep the absolute best performing in terms of actual speed, range, etc., and gun armament of the auxiliary cruisers you converted during the war, because they're actually useful for colonial work, taking the place of some of your older cruisers, which you now need at home. Morocco, the Canary Islands, and Spanish West Africa. Maintaining. There's also the Western Desert, but it still matters, Foxo, to maintain presences in those areas.
Yeah. But in the red, you have the Spanish cities there. that have their own army
No,
garrison.
it's not so much that. It's the Western Sahara and it's the Western Sahara, the Canary Islands, and Spanish Africa is the most important bit. Spanish West Africa.
Wait, we're talking the area of the Sahara that's got less than 1,000 people living in it.
Yes, but it's one
While
of
we've got
it.
Spanish Guiana.
Yes, and again, these are still areas where you have to maintain a presence. You cannot be seen
Uh,
to not maintain a presence.
I'll be honest, I don't think Spain does need to maintain that sort of naval presence in those areas.
They do. They have to maintain at least a station ship. At both. Be it a colonial gunboat or some form of auxiliary. Maybe a cruiser if tensions are flaring up in the area. That's just the fact of life.
The issue is that those ships aren't going to do anything a land-based garrison of 500 dudes won't do.
It's not.
at that point,
No,
you're
no,
not-
Foxo, you're not understanding. You're not understanding. It's the principle of the thing.
No, it's not, Fleet, because principle's all well and good, but practicality normally comes before principle.
Yes, and there's no reason why the principle cannot be maintained even in the aftermath of the Civil War. You have
But
the
why would they
auxiliaries.
need to? If it's cheaper and easier just to have 500 men there and it's basically a hut.
I cannot even. Do you two not understand how colonial politics works?
At times I think we might understand it better than you do.
You clearly don't,
Yeah,
because you
but
don't understand the
we-
need for a station ship, for a
This
colonial
isn't the 20th
station.
century anymore. This isn't the 20th century anymore. Who's the threat to the colonial station? The British and the French.
It's Foxo.
Who are the
It's not just about fighting a hot war. For fuck's sake.
It's not even a deterrent though. It's not even a Cold War
That's
or any
not
sort of
even
war.
the
It's not
fucking
even any
point.
sort of.
It's having something on the spot to be your active presence in the area.
But that's what your troops are normally for.
Your troops
in this
can't go,
case.
your troops can't posture against an opposing warship to protect your own claims and enforce your territorial waters.
Yes, they can for one,
No,
and
they
have done so in the
fucking
past.
can't.
Easy,
And-
Fleet, easy.
And also, who is going to be threatening you?
It doesn't fucking matter. It's the principle
It
of the thing.
does.
For fuck's sake.
It does matter.
Please. Why do you think the Royal Navy didn't bother to put colonial stations on a lot of the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific Islands?
Because there's
desolate
because there's no real threat to them. That doesn't apply in the case we're talking about.
it does.
No,
Please
it doesn't.
please answer. Who is the threat?
France, Britain, especially Vichy France. Portugal, maybe.
Your colonial gunboat's doing nothing. It's not even a look at them.
It is not just about the potential for a shooting war. I keep saying this over and over again, and you
It's
keep
not even
fucking
beyond a
listening.
shooting war, though. We
You
Ah.
take it easy already, goddamn.
are listening, Fleet, but also you keep making it sound like this one potential gunboat is enough to enforce a claim. If someone wants it, for whatever reason, that's not going to be enough.
That's
It's not even going to be a blip on their radar.
So
Honestly, an actual ground force might contribute more because they can be used for guerrilla force.
You're applying 21st century thinking to the 20th century. Please stop trying to do that.
No.
Please, you're applying 19th and 20th century to the 21st.
I'm not. We're talking
no,
about
no,
the
no,
aftermath of the Spanish
No,
Civil War.
Fleet is applying 1700 and 1800s logic to to early to mid 1900s.
Okay, right, please. Do you know why the British vessels in China and the American colonial vessels in China did their job so well? Because, yes, there were forces in theatre that could deal with them quite easily. But they were backed up by the implicit threat that if you spoke with them, the Royal Navy would come knocking, or the US Navy would come knocking, or the Japanese Navy would come knocking. As Spain, after Civil War, you do not have the implicit threat.
That doesn't mean you still. That does not mean you withdraw the vessels from those garrison stations. You have to maintain the presence mission. You have to. If you do not, it'll be seen as a capitulation to either other powers or the natives. You cannot abandon the presence mission.
As long as there's a garrison of 1,000 men, like they did in the Civil War, it's still your presence there.
This is the
No,
you have to have a naval presence. I don't care what arguments you two make. You have not given a satisfactory reason for why you do not.
But Fleet, so you right? No offense, Fleet, but then you're literally not even listening to us. If you want to say that we're not listening to you, you have just said we are not listening to you. You refuse to listen to anything we say there.
Land-based forces are very good for controlling a colony, but they cannot posture against a naval vessel at sea for trespassing in your colonial waters. Only another ship can do that. They cannot say that they cannot literally come up to a ship and say you have violated our colonial waters, unless they're going out in a fucking rowboat to do it from a land-based shore installation, which is pathetic in and of itself.
But how much is this actually coming up at this point in time? Because we're now talking at past Civil War. We're talking 1939.
It's on that fleet. You do know that this thing called the fucking radio exists.
That's not. No, it's not. That's not. That is not what I mean.
Easy.
When the Brazilians infringe on their territorial British Guyana, the Dutch do it. Do they send a ship out? No. They just radio the ship that's infringing on their waters, going, waters, leave, and the ship fucking leaves.
That is because, again, as you say, there is implicit threats backing that up. In Spain, you do not have that. You need to rigorously enforce your neutrality and your territorial waters. More so than a major power needs to. It matters more as a minor nation than it does as a major naval power. Minors cannot make the same concessions towards soft power that major naval powers can. You have to have a presence on the spot to at least have the threat of violence on the spot. Even if it will be blown up in the cause of inflicting that violence, you still need a physical threat that, say, if you do not withdraw, there will be some exchange of gunfire. Even if you win, you will still have crossed the red line. Whereas a nation like Britain or France can rely on the implicit threat of force from its large and expansive fleet, the Spanish and other minor nations like Portugal have to rely on the threat of force on the spot, even if that force may not be equivalent to that which it is being forced to posture against.
So, then, how did the Dutch do it, then?
The same way.
At this point in time, they didn't have the implicit threat, but they still would just radio people of, hey, you infringed our waters, please leave.
Yeah.
Other minor naval powers did do this.
Yes, but they didn't rely. Yes, but it's
because
it's
as long as the information can get to their governments, unless it is a major power going to do something, and even then, if it is a major power, honestly, there's not much you can really do about it. If, say, Japan is coming in and is refusing to leave, well, it doesn't matter what you've got, you can't really do much against that. The implicit threat of force is no longer present, because, oh god, oh, they'll shoot me. Well, it'll be cute to see that little gunboat fight this heavy cruiser. Same for most other nations. For minor nations, it is honestly almost more relying on goodwill, practically.
But that's not...
Certain other nations could back it up with force. But it all depending on the minor nation of who is infringing on the water will depend on how things
then go
diplomatically.
Then why does Spain, Portugal, every minor power of the colonial empire maintain a fleet of colonial gunboats and presence ships across their various possessions? Doing exactly what I've stated they just do.
For the Portuguese, they are legacy units that are based out of Mozambique.
So can the Spanish in Spanish Guinea, which is the whole thing we're talking about. In Western Sahara and Morocco, I'll concede they're close enough to Spain that you don't really need to. But the Canary Islands and Spanish Guinea, I would say you absolutely do need to, and you have bases that you can do it from. This is my thing, because like I'm just like I can see the bones of the argument you're trying to make. You know, there isn't the need. Like, what's the point? Why bother? Let's just capitulate all of our overseas possessions to our rivals because we can't defend them anyway.
That's not what we said. We never said anything about just capitulate them.
But by not having a ship on the spot that can respond if need be, then even if that response is getting blown out of the
that's not a sign of capitulation. Foxer, you're making a bit icky.
But it's a case, if you have a garrison like every fucking colony did, for your opponent to seize the colony, fight a conflict, or do anything to fuck you in the colony, they've got to interact with that garrison.
I'm going to jump in here and say I think the gunboat is useful for more than just the presence mission, because having it there, it can also act as sort of like an impromptu coast guard for rescue mission.
And it also provides a way to interdict smuggling and enforce tariffs and maritime law within your economic zone and territorial waters.
So I would argue it is justified to have it, but not necessarily because of the presence mission, but, well, it is the presence mission. It's part of the role of the presence mission, effectively to do what, like a border security. It is your border checkpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's... I mean,
At that point, you're looking at a gunboat. At that point, you're looking at a Coast Guard cutter.
Yes, but colonial gunboats...
That's what each land suggests. But the thing is, you also... Right, if I can hop in here for a sec. Also, it's just useful to have, in somewhere like all the Spanish colonial holdings, where's everyone living on the coast? What is the intercity travel options? Non-existent. It's handy to have just, oh, we need to go, 200 miles down the coast. Right, lads, let's hop on, 50 chaps from the colonial garrison, get them on the boat, take them down.
And if you need fire
drop them
support,
off.
whatever you're dealing with,
You've
it's
got
there.
a gunboat. You only have a 4-inch gun, but that's still bigger than anything else anyone can do.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just a handy little thing. It's better to have than not, I'd say.
Yeah, at that point, just have a ferry or a Coast Guard cutter.
That's what we're suggesting. Basically, an armed ferry. That's what Fleet's saying. Use these auxiliary ships. Spanish auxiliary ships.
This is the thing.
To be fair, that's not what Fleet said.
Well, no, colonial...
Was that not what Fleet said?
Well, no. Colonial gunboats and auxiliaries are multi-purpose vessels. They have uses in wartime, but primarily their use is policing, tariff collection, and other various duties that the governor or colonial garrison might require of them. It's not just, and also like I said, I've been focusing on the military side of it in my arguments, but there is also the civilian side of it and the administration side of it. It enables you to do things that just having a land-based garrison can't do. It expands the scope of your operations.
What territories does Spain actually have post-Civil War that it needs to defend with these ships?
The real pair of... Well, there is less of a case to be made for the Canary Islands, but in Spanish Guinea there is an absolute...
The Canary Islands are within range of actual Spain.
Yeah, but in Spanish Guinea there is absolutely a case to be made for at least an auxiliary to be there. I mean, be it an armed merchantman or a colonial gunboat or two. It's far enough away. It's in the middle of an area of well-traveled ocean.
Spanish Guinea is already a black hole for the Spanish government. It produces fuck all. It's costly to maintain.
Yes.
And you're just going to throw it into a black hole.
Yeah, but that's not how colonial policy is thought of.
Okay, so apparently Fleet, for the record, Guinea was actually protected by the Colonial Guard garrison divisions. Spanish Guinea wasn't actually even using boats. They were using a land-based garrison, from what I can find.
Okay, so what do they do if a ship sends out a distress call in their area?
Then they likely use a purely civilian boat, would be my guess.
Yeah. Do they have any?
Yeah, it's a port. Ports have fucking boats.
Composed of 430 European and indigenous personnel. Yeah, I'm mostly just seeing no naval. They didn't have any naval presence under them.
I'm having trouble actually.
Hello, Cyclic.
I'm actually having trouble having a firm answer one way or the other. But yeah, I actually can't see. I would find
following the budget law of the 1908, the Colonial Guard was formed.
Yeah, I would find it. I would find it.
The whole region was considered pacified. Like, I'm genuinely not sure what places in Spain actually do need these. And also keep in mind, if a ship is in distress at Spanish Guinea is right next to a lot of other powers that will also have stuff there that can go, right, there is a ship in distress here. What can we do with this?
Remember, it's quite literally borders the Belgian Congo and French Cameroon.
I mean, Spain
And
did
You've also got British stuff as well.
Spain did maintain a force of 4 gunboats up until 1957.
Let's start.
Yeah, but where the fuck were they?
I'm trying to
The phrase
find that out. I'm
That's
trying
the bit,
to find.
yeah. I'm going to phrase it slightly differently. So that is the bit I am curious about.
Because they've built them
Just
clearly,
place
but where the
straight
heck have they gone? Where have they
Yeah,
gone?
exactly.
Where are
They
they?
can't have just disappeared, surely.
They were borrowed.
Thank you, Brandon Larson. Every little bit helps. Gotta be somewhere. Where are they?
Nope, sunk. When were they built? Sorry, Fleet.
So the first trio were built in the 20s, and then the third one was built seemingly during and after the Civil War.
Right. What ship? What are they called?
Let me just.
Hello, Fleet.
Hello, Cyclic. How are you?
You got me for 10 minutes, so I got to make a work phone call, and then I'll be back.
Because I'm genuinely curious.
I'm trying to.
Also, you might want to mute your mic when you're not actively talking, because your interference is quite bad.
So these are the 2 classes of actual modern-ish gunboats I can find built after the First World War. There's 2 of them.
Oh shit!
But there's no information on them on Wikipedia, and I will actually. I'm just doing a wide.
Okay, so the gunboats Dato and Canavasco del Castillo sank the ship Canbo de Tome, the Umbrella Company, transporting weapons for Odessa, and that was 1937. So yeah, you've got Cangelas, the Fact, and then the Danto. Danto was sent after renamed simply Danto. The ship was sailed to Colombia, was authorized at the end of 1932. In response, Peruvian 34 carried out transporting of troops from the Canary Islands to the territory of Infi, the sister ship.
It is one of those weird ones where I'm.
Goes to Spain.
It doesn't say.
In 1946 is the first time she was ever ordered and assigned to Equatorial Guinea. Is what I can find for one of them.
Okay, so some of the Spanish gunboats did serve out there. but it doesn't. But it doesn't.
Yeah, so
but,
the only time from what I can find, that path was
seem-
only sent to Guinea in 46 and later.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Yeah,
And
but
they were
I
basically
think,
used almost more as hulks than anything.
yeah, I think I think it's clear that any gunboats that were sent out there were either used as hulks, accommodation ships, or if they were sent there, it was on an as-needed basis according to the needs of the garrison. There wasn't a permanent station asset. Fair enough.
Because honestly, I think in the period of the after the Spanish Civil War, Spain's really got bigger concerns than having a presence with colonial gunboats. They want some ships they can do a few things with, but they're honestly almost more cargo boats that someone strapped some guns to.
Which, to be fair, that's Colonial Gunboat 101. Practical usage first, armament later.
I wouldn't quite say that's how they usually go, but in terms of design,
For minor nations, it's more important.
Also, the fact that the only place I can find any information on this is the Spanish version of Wikipedia.
Oh, you got there as well? We both ended up in the same place.
And beyond that, apparently they don't exist to the rest of the Western world.
Yeah, apparently they're just they're invisible. You see nothing. Okay, so next.
Okay, so
next.
Interesting. Those were considered motor torpedo boats.
Yeah. Next question. Thoughts on the Swingfire missile? Do you think it's better than the TOW 2 or at least the BGM-C-71C in terms of penetration, power, guidance system, and reliability? Not that familiar with the TOW.
Wasn't this act yesterday or Monday?
These were asked but weren't answered.
I seem to remember this.
I know, because we never got that far, because the others haven't been answered. So I find it there were a Swingfire wasn't mentioned. I don't seem to recall.
No, the Swingfire is an old but large.
Off. I want to say.
All these questions were answered after Fleet left.
Yeah,
but then
most
again,
of these we answered most of them afterwards.
Otherwise, then this would be a very, very quiet ramblings.
Yes.
Okay, it wouldn't be ramblings.
Correct. The previous question on Monday was Javelin.
Yeah, this is
Javelin. Yeah.
No.
Well, to be fair, as I said, these questions were all answered on Monday by other people apart from Fleet after Fleet left and after the YouTube left. So
so this is basically going.
We do need to answer them for YouTube at least, but
do you want to very quickly hit this one with a hammer cyclic?
So I can see the argument with TOW 1. I would disagree. TOW 2, it's a wild no. TOW 2 is wildly better. It's just for a vehicle launched ATGM, it actually gets you into the proper class to launch from vehicles. There's a reason that British reconnaissance forces up in Norway that were supporting Royal Marines, the Norwegian Army, and U.S. Marines paired the Scimitars and the Scorpions not with their own ATGM vehicles that they had in those units that were largely using Swingfire, but TOW Humvees.
Oh.
Swingfire as a missile has some issues compared to TOW 2. One being it is even by TOW standard, very slow. Missile, it has a larger minimum range than TOW because of the way it's fired. The missile has to come back down into the sight. And that also brings in various flight control problems. It makes sense in certain attributes for certain roles, but the funny thing is you can do a similar thing with TOW if you want. This is like the M901, or the launcher that's on the Striker, or the launcher that's on the Bradley. You don't have to expose the vehicle. So it's to say it's better than Toe 2. I disagree. Toe 1, I'd say it's in the eye of the beholder.
Next point.
But it is Swingfire is significantly slower than Toe, and that's saying something. And that runs you into problems even before you're at your max range with the angle the missile is going to be at, its angle of attack, and whether or not you'll get meaningful armor penetration on the front slope of a tank. Because you do need enough of an angle into the armor for a heat warhead to successfully penetrate. If you just glance off, then you've got a
minor problem.
For people. Yeah, you know, if you don't do anything, you know.
Yeah. Like,
so gunnery officer, Toe 2A has tandem. Base Toe 2 does not. So I'm not factoring that in. You've got Toe 2A and Toe 2B that are the tandem setups. The baseline did not. So that's about all I want to beat that horse with.
Yep. Next question is: do you think the MBT-80 was going to be a better MBT than the Leopard 2 and M1 Abrams in the 80s if the MBT-80 was mass-produced? I think functionally, what Challenger 1 became is...
No.
Well, MB-80 wasn't going to be that much different from... Like,
no,
it wasn't...
First of all, it was going to have a smoothbore 120.
Was it?
Yes. The British Army did not want to keep a 120mm gun that dates to the 1950s. Just like they didn't with Challenger 2. And it only took until Challenger 3 to finally get a smoothbore. But MBT-80 was also significantly more mobile than Challenger 1 or 2. It is much more in the mobility realm of Leopard 2 and of Abrams. I would say it would be a much more comparable tank to Leopard 2 or Abrams in the period. It's really difficult to say. That's not MBT-80, whoever, their gunnery officer, but it's really difficult to say what tank would be better because they're designed for different armies who fight differently.
Besides, I feel like comparing...
It would have been a dramatically better tank than the British Army because it would have been a tank designed for the way they wanted to fight, rather than a tank designed for export to the Shah of Iran that then got kept as industrial welfare over MBT-80 by dint of the government making the decision.
Cyclic? Actually, that is MBT-80. That is the...
I don't think that hull is.
That, from what I can tell, that is the agreed upon MBT-80 that Bovington has.
The hull doesn't look like the designs I've seen, but maybe my memory's wrong on that. I don't have the designs to pull up right now, but the finalized stuff that's available. And I'm one of the people that takes what Bovington says on displays and verifies it.
Which I don't think is unreasonable, honestly, but it's what is currently agreed on to be the MBT-80. Or is the MBT-80 that was actually prototype produced?
That's why I'm like, that's
in particular, that is automotive.
Because...
In particular, it is MBT-80 automotive test rig number 2.
Yeah, then that's not MBT-80 Dragon.
But
that's literally just testing the automotive components.
Well, No,
That's much more close to a Challenger 1 hull than an MBT-80 hull.
but it is also still a lineage of the MBT-80.
Yes, but
It is still considered to be an MBT-80 by...
No, that's not how that works at all in tank design, Dragon.
yeah, it's like saying that the mock-ups that led to the Tiger, like the VK3601, are Tigers. They're not. It's the VK3601. It's not a Tiger.
To be fair, Fleet,
I've got a
never
photo that'll show that. So by your definition, Dragon, this here is XM30. It's a Bradley with different suspension and different motors and a different engine. But that's an XM70 automotive test vehicle.
Like, I would argue that the only time a tank truly becomes, like say, a Tiger is only a Tiger if it's, actually a Tiger von Alfst A. The same way that technically there are no MBT-80s because the MBT-80 was never actually fully all bells and whistles prototyped. We can say there's a TOG-2 because TOG-2 was fully
right,
prototyped.
but then, Fleet, if you're saying that a number of the British prototypes aren't actually what they are, so then that technically means there was no Black Prince, even though...
When you get to the production representative prototypes, that's where it changes.
Yeah.
But you do not see that in automotive test prototypes until the very, very, very late stages.
Like
and
Black
that
Prince.
is very clearly not an MBT-80 hull.
Yeah, like Black Prince is a production test prototype. It's like, okay, let's put everything together.
No, it wasn't.
I don't really believe it was, Fleet.
Oh, fair enough. Well, in that case,
Black Prince wasn't actually... Like, this is what I mean by, if we go off that, then a lot of British tanks...
Yeah, I would agree with that statement, Dragon.
I wouldn't, though, because I would go off what the actual designers went, but fair.
The thing is, when you actually look at how these documents and when you look at how the terminology goes, that isn't what what you're reading is not what the designers are saying, Dragon.
What the... Okay, this is a doozy of a question. Do you think the UK is more advanced than the US in terms of SAM and anti-aircraft missile development?
No. Handedly no. Never.
That was easy.
I don't know why you would even assume that.
Next question.
Because it's just demonstrably false.
US sat there with all of the missiles that work really well. Britain sat there with some.
Like, much is made of the British version of AIM-7, and then you look at when that comes out, and you look at the version of AIM-7 Spare that the US is fielding at the exact same time, and while the Seeker is marginally less advanced, it not as much as it's made out to be, and it's got like 30% more range.
And it's also based on
so
a
the
US
missile can actually, engage a properly cranking aircraft that's closing.
Yeah, but again, it comes back to the
BVR distance.
Yeah, it's also it's based on a US missile. It's not a fully indigenous program as well, which is an even a further indictment. Why did the RIM 50 Typhon program fail for the USN? Do you think the USN are already dead set on having the Standard Missile and the Talos for the time being?
It failed because the technology wasn't there. The computing technology just wasn't there yet for what the Navy wanted. They had pretty much all the logic figured out. It's just they needed the computing tech to be able to do it. And they also, quite frankly, wanted a less obtuse to run radar. And it's why they basically immediately started back up with Aegis once they start getting once computing starts to really improve. And it's why Aegis goes somewhere, because they got to the threshold where they could do it. So.
Next question. Thoughts on the pre-Sidewinder and Sparrow AAMMI designs of the US, like the Tiamat, Gorgon 3, Firebird, Oriole, the predecessor to the Phoenix, the AAMN-10 Eagle. Do you think they're just an experimental missile, and that the US took a leap in technology to get the more reliable and effective Sidewinder, Phoenix, and Sparrow?
My answer to this one was general laughter, and not at the question or anything like that, but Sidewinder comes out pretty early, like it's going on Saber, F-86 Sabers. I think AIM-9 starts out with a freaking 5-inch high-bar motor on it.
That's a heck of an early run-in.
And you have some very early engagements, actually, over the freaking Taiwan Strait between the Taiwanese who have this and the Chinese who don't have air-to-air missiles, and a MiG comes back and lands with a Sidewinder that failed to detonate stuck in it. And that's how you get the first Soviet air-to-air missile. Well, heat seeker really that's put into service is it's a clone of A9B. Yeah, R3 is the designation. Thank you. And that they would go on to, realize the problems and then develop their own missiles. But because AIM-9B does have some problems. There's a reason the U.S. moved on. But like AIM-9 comes out pretty early. And the Sparrow research actually starts, I think, in the 40s. I think AIM-9 does as well, but I don't remember exactly when AIM-7 properly entered service off the top of my head, but
so the next question is so I answered that one. Okay, now we actually are starting to make some real gains here. Why do you think the Mark II 5-inch 54 gun has a quicker rate of fire per minute than the twin 5-inch 38 Mark 38, even though the Mark 42 is a single gun mount, it is faster than the twin guns? Because one is an auto-loading gun and the other isn't.
Yeah. That gun is also faster than the current Mark 45. But that's because the U.S. Navy wanted to lighten the gun, and they were willing to lower the rate of fire of it.
Yeah, the amount of 5-inch boom that could be delivered by that thing in a short rate of time was insane.
I mean, it was designed to be an anti-aircraft gun, as well as any surface. And it was quite literally designed to replace the dual 5-inch 38. And one of its objectives was to outdo it. There's a reason, contrary to what World of Warships shows, there was not a seriously done twin design. I think it was talked about initially, and then they went, why? Let's reduce top weight. We can achieve, with 4 of these guns, what we can achieve with, 4 twin 5-inch 38 mounts in an overall lighter setup within the ship with less manpower that sustains its rate of fire better.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Assuming the Littorio has survived the war and we're giving back to Italy intact, no cut barrels or broken equipment, and not asked for as reparations, how long would they last in the Cold War? So Italy has a pair of reasonably capable large surface
And-
combatants.
Somehow Stalin doesn't cause problems because of this, I guess?
Well,
Yes.
Stalin wouldn't have a choice in the matter.
No, that's actually the reason they got scrapped. That's the reason a lot of Italian larger combatants got scrapped.
Even then,
Phoenix
there
can
is
go into more detail.
even
on
if Stalin
this.
does try and make some fuss about it, there's no way in hell he's going to be getting anything naval from it beyond old, outdated vessels. You might be able to make a fuss, but I don't think overall it'll make that much of an effect.
He made enough of a fuss that the US and the British went, these are getting scrapped in Italy. They were hoping Italy was going to be able to keep them by simply just delaying the scrapping. And Stalin started to make enough of a fuss that the US went and put its foot down and said, yeah, no, these have to get scrapped now.
Bear in mind, they don't get scrapped until the 50s.
Yeah, this was the Soviets making the fuss that did this. I don't think the Italians would have been able to afford to man them. Talking with Phoenix on the history of the Italian Navy, it was a mix of Stalin, Zuikaku, and the Soviets writ large, but Stalin kind of set the motion going in the Soviet government on it. That's why I put his name in there. I highly doubt the Italians would have been able to man the ships, and they would have dramatically held back the missilization of Italy, of the Italian Navy, with the cost of running them. So
I think if there's any possibility of them ever seeing use, it is not until towards the end of the 50s, and one will be cannibalized as spares for the other to reduce costs. Only one will likely ever see service, if that happens at all.
I mean, the Italians also weren't really in a position where they felt they needed stuff to match the Sverdlovs in a gun-to-gun engagement. But that's because they were very, very early adopters of Terrier. Now, they were also very strapped for missile combatants. With both them and the French actually having to stare down multiple Kinda-class cruisers in the Mediterranean because of the Black Sea Fleet. Whereas to a navy like the U.S. Navy, the Kinda, while a little bit of a concern, when you're running around with a decently large number of Terrier and
Talos,
Tartar-equipped combatants. I mean, Talos helps in the anti-surface role, but it kind of isn't really designed for engaging things like Shattuck. But from a defensive perspective against Shattuck, the U.S., because of the numbers of its missile combatants, is in a much better spot. The U.S. is also outside of the 6th Fleet and the Pacific Fleet, so in the fleet that's got the attention, Atlantic Fleet, isn't really facing that many Kindas, because the Soviets pretty rapidly pulled them out of the Northern Fleet. They were really bad seaboats. They would get replaced by the Crestas, which have the ready-to-fire armament of Shaddocks. I really don't think the Italians. I mean, they might have kept the ship in layup, but I don't see them meaningfully bringing her into service. Like, she might see service very early on until Garibaldi comes in.
Yeah.
But once Garibaldi's in, there's no point.
Yeah.
Because once she's back in a missile role, I mean, she's only got 4 135mm guns, but she's able to sling Rim 2 Terrier at anything that particularly offends her.
Yep.
In a sea context, which she's going to eviscerate a spare one. This is... and I mean, the French are running around with carriers.
Yeah.
So
the next question is...
And not to mention the French have a certain ship themselves. So...
Oh yeah, Chambard. Next question. How
we're
would you...
getting aid that Italy just wasn't getting monetarily.
Yes. How would you modernize the pre-dreadnoughts in the German fleet through the interwar period if you were the admiral in charge of the navy? I can't really go wrong with what the German Weimar fleet did historically. You start by operating the oldest ships in the fleet that are the longest lived, while attempting to conserve the comparatively newer ships for later use. There's a reason why Schlesien and Schleswig-Holstein were the last ships to see use by the German Navy as active combatants, because they were the newest German pre-dreadnoughts and therefore had the least mileage on the clock overall.
Yeah, you're not retaining them really for their combat capability. You're retaining them as effectively training ships with live guns.
Yep.
They have some limited combat capability, but you don't want them fighting an interwar heavy cruiser.
No, the way you actually... like, the only modernizations are fire control refits to bring them up to standard solely for training and to increase their combat capability, and a light suite of some heavy and light AA guns, again, primarily for training, but for limited self-defense as well.
Yeah, these ships they're around, like, as replacements for these ships, the Panzer Chiefs actually do a pretty good job. They just don't make sense from a commerce rating perspective. But, like, yeah, they're...
Like, there's no, like, you're basically looking at these ships as basically biding time until all you need these ships to do is to bide time until their replacement windows come up, and then replace them.
Yeah. And to help you maintain officers and men. To run a navy with ships of this size. And they're not particularly that big, but they're still large enough in the way they respond.
Yeah. So again, tying into this is, how would you handle the interwar German navy if I am the admiral? Oh, it's really simple. I gear it exclusively towards fighting the Soviets in the Baltic. Because fighting the French on land prior to the rise of the Führer, and since I'm actually since we're talking about the Weimar period, not the period after the rise of the Nazi Party, fighting the French is going to lead to a one-way trip to French troops marching to Berlin, so the navy isn't really going to have that much.
That's a very interesting assessment.
Look, at least in the immediate aftermath of the war, that's what it appears.
The reason I say that is because, sure, but under the actual Weimar Republic, the German army did some very, very funky things that brought it to a position where if it was only the French...
How do I oil bearings?
I'll tell you in text chat.
Where if it was only the French, they were... they had a decent shot. The main thing is they need to buy time for their own mobilization.
Okay, fair enough.
Which they technically weren't supposed to be able to do.
Fair enough.
They set up a system that got around it.
Fair enough. Okay, so in that case then, I'm gonna publicly aim at the publicly aim at containing the Soviet Baltic Fleet while privately keeping some options open for limited warfare against the Marine Nationale. So Emden's a good start. She's a decent cruiser for showing the flag worldwide. If it's up to me personally, I'm probably going to build something similar to the Panzerschiff, but I'll trade their exceptional range for a steam turbine plant and a much shorter legs to at least fully protect them across their entire vitals against 8-inch shellfire. So they are basically the Deutschlands, but they're much shorter legged and are basically dedicated to being Germany's answer to the treaty cruiser, because we have none of our own. But we also need the trio of them in a pinch to stand and fight a Ganget. Because yes, some of them might die to the Ganget, but the Ganget's also going to die. Don't build the Königsbergs. Instead aim for a ship of either 6 or 8 5.9-inch guns on 7,500 tons. So basically, German RF fusers. Don't try and run before we can walk, basically. Against the French, I am actually happy to accept something with 8 5.9,
Yeah,
8 or 6
Fleet,
5.
you're cutting out pretty bad.
Am I? Oh, sugar. Hang on. Let Fleet just How much of that did you all hear?
Bits and pieces of all of it, but it wasn't great.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
If you don't build the Königsberg class, make them German era fusers.
Okay, so
Which
let
is
me start again.
Weird.
So, starting from the beginning with Emden, how am I coming through? Still choppy, or am I coming through okay now?
Seem to be coming through decent.
Okay.
We'll see if that holds up.
Okay then. So, Emden is a good starting point. Nothing wrong with her. Like I say, I've already covered what I will do with the pre-dreadnoughts. They're just there to basically keep time and provide some limited capital ship deterrent against the Russians. For what little that's worth. Then they will be replaced by... The capital ships will be replaced by the Deutschlands, but again, like I said, they're not going to be fitted with diesel engines, they're going to be fitted with steam turbines. Going to aim for a speed of about 26 to 27 knots rather than 28. I'm going to massively shorten their legs even on top of that by also reducing their fuel consumption, and basically making them capable of operations in the North Sea and the Baltic, but not much further afield. That saved weight from not using diesel engines and not having as much fuel will be funneled into protection. I want them to have a full belt and deck arrangement to protect against 8-inch shellfire, or at least over their vitals for 8-inch shellfire, and be able to at least resist 6-inch shellfire for their entire length up to the bow and stern, making them able to effectively deal with enemy cruisers, rather than get absolutely slapped by 6-inch cruisers with rapid-fire guns. They also need to be trained in the understanding that they should, if operating as a trio, or ideally, if I can get at, a quartet, be able to... Because ideally, if I'm going to be operating under the assumption that if Hitler doesn't rise, I'm going to get all 6 to replace all 6 of my pre-dreadnoughts, which gives me 2 battle squadrons of 3. And as a battle squadron, I'd rate them as about capable of taking down some of the older French battleships and the Russian battleships. Like, yes, that squadron may suffer losses during the engagement, but their opponent will be dead. And individually, they're more than a match for any cruiser on the high seas, given their increased protection. So not so much commerce raiders as pre-dreadnought replacements in this particular case. In terms of cruisers, I am going to create not Emden follow-ons, but Basically, either a ship with 6 or 8 5.9-inch guns. And what I might try and do is I might try and sort of square the circle and go with twin turrets fore and aft and single mounts on the center line running backwards, and maybe 1 or 2 wing singles. Well, yeah, because I'm trying to square the circle. Look at the Königsbergs. The Germans try to do ridiculously too much on 7,500
Yeah, but you're going way too far in the other direction, I would have said. Using single mount guns at this period is inadvisable, to say the least.
I'm dealing with a navy.
I was going to use interesting, but sure.
It's basically down to the fact that I'm trying to avoid the pitfalls of the. It also means I can probably.
And why are we going back to World War One style wing mounts?
Well, not all wing mounts, just 1 or 2, depending on where or not, depending if there are areas of the superstructure that can't be.
Why wing mounts at all?
Because it's quite clear that the German.
What are you talking about putting in wing mounts fleet?
Basically, my cruiser instead of the Königsberg would probably have 2 or 3 twins, 5.9-inch, and then a few single 5.9-inch pedestal mounts to round out its armament.
No, there's no reason not to. You could do 3 twin turrets and it'd be fine.
That's fine then. I mean, I suppose I'd accept that. I mean, I would like a broadside of more than 6 guns, but I'm not willing to go to Königsberg levels.
At that point, try and get a 4th twin and go for 8.
That might be pushing. That might be pushing what you can get away with as Germany on 7,500 tons. Because we're not.
You're better off. So fleet, you're better off going with a ship that's got a reasonable protection scheme for the tonnage and is actually built and able to do stuff off your coast at minimum, even if it only has 6 guns.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point, actually. So, yeah, fair enough.
Well, if Britain could get away with 6 guns on 6,600 tons at full load, if you're aiming for, 7,700, you probably could get another turret in.
But bear in mind, we also have to deal with German efficiencies of construction and design, and also, the whole lightly built that we shake ourselves to pieces and stability issues. So I think it's better to play it safe and aim for 6, and then the next class we can go, okay, this is what we learnt from building these ships, this is what we figured out from, actually laying them down in service. The next class can go, okay, we can have 8 guns now. And at least that way they can accompany the sharp.
Maybe just do the 6 gun as a one-off then.
No, I'm going to want a class of at least 3.
I personally think 6 guns is woefully inadequate, as most nations do find. And considering this is you,
well, the reason
you should know 6 guns is inadequate for what's coming.
What's the question?
Again, I'm Weimar Germany.
I would fleet basically do the German Navy.
You're in a weird position because of the Panzer Chiefs. In this role, they're going to be able to act
as destroyer
leaders. They're going to be acting much more like no. They're going to be acting much more in line with more of a heavy cruiser style setup. Not quite really, but I mean, yes, they're technically your capital combatants for the moment, but realistically, these light cruisers are here more for screening them against French destroyers and less so French cruisers. Or against Russian destroyers. And yes, a lot of people would find the 6-gun light cruiser inadequate, but you're also still fundamentally limited by your tonnage. And remember, the Germans are in a position where they have a uniquely German problem. They have no real expertise in designing modern ships by design. Thanks to the Treaty of Versailles. and they have to rebuild that back. There are ways you could improve the Königsbergs, and if you're willing to cheat, which Weimar Germany was willing to cheat. Looks at the Luftwaffe, looks at what they were doing with their army. Or I should say the not Luftwaffe.
Yes.
But
Lufthansa.
it was even better than that. It was all the pilot clubs that.
Oh
were
yeah,
being
and the
funded
gliding
by the
clubs and all the rest of it.
And the sheer interesting types of aircraft that some of these clubs had. I mean, they're not armed. They're not, but they're really close to HE-112s. You know, or if that's the right designation, I don't remember the open cockpit gull-wing monoplane.
In the early Weimar period, just talking about Arado 68s and being the aircraft that a lot of these flying clubs have that are suspiciously not armed.
I mean, if the airframes are around.
But yeah, I mean, the real rub comes now, assuming no rise of Hitler, because otherwise, well, it's kind of the long-term build strategy basically ends in.
Wait, no. Why are we assuming no rise of Hitler?
Because at that point, long-term build strategy ends, and I'm basically stuck on the path to, you know.
Yeah, but okay, but that's kind of the question, though.
It's interwar periods. I have to go through the. Okay, so Adolf Hitler rises to power, which means I'm not going to get the second trio of my Deutschlands, which is a bit annoying because I was relying on those as my heavy cruiser surrogates, because he'll want capital ships in their place. What I might try and do.
Are you cutting out again?
Yes.
What is going on with my mic today?
Oh, neat night.
Let me just trim down a bunch of things, just so that everything is as it should be.
You know, in Montana, initially the first block of 17 questions were all just one mega paragraph.
They were.
So it was fun to format that properly.
Yeah, but very quickly, now that I think I'm coming in clear again, am I?
Near you again.
So far.
Right. Okay. So Adolf Hitler's rise to power puts me in a quandary because by rights I now want to sabotage the German Navy because I'm me. I want to inflict as much. I'm happy to work for Weimar Germany.
You probably don't, because that probably means you get killed.
Well, I have to do it in a way that's. I mean, to be fair, I'll probably just start building historical designs with all the flaws and whistles built into them at that point. Because at that point, I'm no longer serving Weimar Germany, I'm serving the Nazis, and I can't, in good conscience, build good designs for them. I'm sorry, you've put me in charge.
Then you might have the problem. Though, if you've apparently been making much better designs, relatively speaking, they'll go, well, held up. Why are these ships now all of a sudden having these problems?
I say,
why is there this sort of vast shift in ideas?
Yeah.
Yards.
Yes, but again, as I say, I am not going to provide the Nazis with the means to potentially achieve greater success and kill more British and Allied sailors.
They probably, to be brutally honest, they probably won't.
If I give them a quartet of decent fast battleships,
I get where you're coming from.
I mean, so Fleet, giving them decent fast battleships. So what I will say, and some people in this voice call may go, what? Is if you remove how heavy the Bismarcks and Scharnhorsts are for what they are, they're decent fast battleships for what they were designed for. Particularly Bismarck and Tirpitz. They're a little backwards in some design choices, which is what makes them so heavy for what they are. But they're reasonably capable combatants. They have some Achilles heels, but so do the South Dakotas, firing or gun stocking or radar and fire control and power out. But it's probably not going to change anything. hang on, I'm getting a phone call. That is work. I gotta drop for a bit.
Alright, fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose Sagnet's got a point there, but it's just out of principle, you know.
Like,
Where I was going with this was I think the best way to, shall we say, throw a bit of chaos into the ring
Oh,
is
I'm.
to just outright say, all right, I'm done. I retire.
Oh no, it's better than that. I can build them a really powerful surface fleet and no U-boats. That's the best way you sabotage the German war effort. Because then that makes the RN threat one-dimensional.
Yeah, apart from that, you just gave the British a mono threat problem, which they can deal with pretty simply.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I said.
well, no,
can make them a boat.
it's also a fact of you've made the Royal Navy's job a lot harder doing that.
How?
Well, yes
Because
and no.
remember,
It's
for
easier
a lot
and
of the
harder.
war, the actual forces the Home Fleet has aren't particularly heavy.
You do
There are a
realize?
lot of
They
heavy
are.
assets concentrated
I mean-
in the Mediterranean.
They have multiple battle cruisers and a good number of battleships.
And I
It
will
is
point
pretty
out,
heavy.
But
and I
compare
will
that
point
to
out,
the
as Dr.
Two
Clark has
fleets in the
said,
Mediterranean.
I will point out, as Dr. Clark has said, if I upscale my capital ship construction and other normal surface fleet assets, so will the RN prior to the
We'll
war.
do the same.
So, I
Churchill will not be able to get his whole capital ship build pause in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's just, you're going to run into an issue when it comes to Britain of they're starting halfway. They're starting
now Foxo's breaking up.
behind.
Uh,
And you've
I-
made
I
it
mean-
harder in that critical period.
not
The Royal Navy needs a lot.
No?
no. They'll
Because
just,
the Royal Navy needs a large contingent to fight the Germans.
Fleet, you're cutting
as
out again.
well as the
I've not said a
Italians.
thing. I've not said a thing. I didn't cut out. That was me
You-
shutting up.
But you did, and you're cutting out.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Like, honestly, the best way to sabotage Germany in your position is just fuck around with Krupp.
Oh, hell, if you really want Britain to
I
win,
mean,
do nothing
Foxo,
but build
I mean-
submarines.
No, that is
Yeah,
a really.
make it a mono threat.
Because then the Royal Navy will just be able to go, right, all the heavy units go that away. We can just deal with this with destroyers and some cruisers.
Yeah, because what do you think the Royal Navy essentially does in 43 when Scharnhorst and Gneisenau are defunct? You just sort of see they sweep the U-boats from the Atlantic. Once it's a
No.
mono threat.
These weapons will win us the war.
Instead of U-boats, just go to armed merchant cruisers.
No, those no.
Yeah, but you can probably produce a good number of those. Is the problem.
And also,
Yeah,
they were
be a
actually
pain in
effective.
the ass.
They were also actually kind of effective during the Second
Yeah.
World War. That is actually a way to
You
really.
can argue that effectivity comes from their rarity, though.
All right. What
yeah,
is
there
the
is that.
easiest way to bankrupt
I
Germany?
mean, I mean, to be blunt, providing
What
any
can we build to
providing any mono threats to the RN and basically setting their alarm bells ringing in any way, be it either capital ship or be it a larger surface fleet, it doesn't matter which, as long as you shake the RN from its we can afford to build up slowly routine. It doesn't matter, Foxo, that my fleet will be bigger. It doesn't matter that I've seemingly denied the British their build. I haven't. I've just forced them to go faster, and they will go faster. Dr. Clark has said this on numerous occasions.
And yeah, this is something I have to agree. Like Britain would definitely be able to deal with the capital.
But it's a case of it's spin-up time.
No,
it's
not that.
Britain
And
can
it's like it's a
right.
case of
Because I'm
if
wrong,
Germany's got a large surface fleet, you have the rest of the fleet in the Mediterranean, and then you don't have the Indian Ocean fleet.
Foxo,
No,
but right.
Fox-
Keep in mind,
Japanese
the
get
fleet's doing this the way you probably will. The Germany's getting these capital ships 41, 42. So you're getting the Lions ordered in 39, and they're probably out by 40.
Yeah, and also more to the point, if I'm
Yeah.
doing also,
Yeah,
and
but
also, if I'm
that
doing
makes
this,
it worse, though, Dragon. That makes it worse.
how?
No,
coming
how
in
does
at
having
the
more
time-
how does having more battleships?
Because the Royal Navy doesn't go 1-to-1 with capital ships against its foe. It always tries to have a capital ship superiority. They always try to have more than their opponent.
Which the Royal Navy will still have.
Because it'll
And
have
on the defensive,
Actually,
Royal Navy
sorry.
proved you
Royal
need
Navy are probably
several-
laying down the lions in 1938.
And you've got
So
the
you're
KGVs
almost certainly
as well.
having 4 of them out by
No,
1940.
if the Lions are down in 38, it's debatable if you get the KGVs.
No,
Would they run the
said
lines, or would
oh.
they not just run more KGVs?
No.
You get the KGVs. Why wouldn't you, the KGVs are earlier than the Lions? They're already all laid down by that point.
They're built. They start being built in 37.
Yeah, and
So it's basically you're going back to
37. They're ordered in 37.
yeah,
They
and,
don't start actual.
No, they.
Hans and Howe don't start until later.
but yes,
You know,
but they
you probably
will.
don't get Anson and you might not get Anson and Howe. Then again, Anson and Howe ordered April 37, laid down June and July 37.
Yeah, so you are going to
You're
get.
probably getting. You're probably still
Because the
potentially
thing
getting.
is,
Or
the
you'll be
thing
getting
is, the
the
best,
pre-ordered as
the
Laid
best-
live.
down in 38. They're going to be ordered in 37.
Hello,
So why
Phoenix.
would you order Anson and Howe if you've already
You might
ordering
not,
the
but
Lions
you've still
to lay
got
them
three.
down in 38?
best-
You've then still got 3 KGVs.
yeah, the best I can bear in mind. The
And-
best I can do. The best I can do is Germany, and bear in mind this is to force the RN to kick up its by not building U-boats and by kicking up the surface fleet to try and give the Führer a perceived sense
Turn
of.
out again.
Oh, for fuck! What is going on with the bloody Discord today?
Might it be the fact that you're doing 2 things at once?
No, because I've done 2 things at once before and it's been fine. I think Theatre at Sea is having a fucking
And
moment because
sometimes you've got background processes going on fleet that draw enough processor or enough RAM, or Discord's got a memory leak, or another program has a slight leak, and you run into problems.
well, I can't fix that, can I? I have to just bear
Now,
with it.
YouTube does say you keep being fine, but
Yeah, this is
That's because
it's
it's
a
working
memory leak
stupidly.
by restarting your PC.
or it
So you
could
play
just be a
RAM
case of
cache.
that you're hosting. Keep in mind, you are also hosting a multiplayer game at the same time as
yes,
this.
it's Discord that's the problem.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
going to do it.
No, it's Discord that's the problem. I keep saying this because you are
I'm
also
sorry, that
getting
poor
out.
internet
To be
chip
fair,
of the Wi-Fi board.
it might be able to do it. It's just because certain people you can do it.
You might,
To be
you might
fair-
not have
Yeah,
enough
but
upload
Dragon-
speed.
Yeah, but Dragon, you're remembering Fleet's PC's fucking ancient.
So's mine, yet it can still handle it.
Different components, but it
I
also
know,
could,
it's-
it
I know,
also
it's
literally
different
could be his
components.
upload speed.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could be it. I do get that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything.
Like,
more
there's
than
a
I have-
lot of factors here, Fleet, that might be affected.
I'm not doing anything more than I have actually done.
Did he-
I've done this before, and we've not had these
Are
problems.
you in a flat?
He's got out again. He's got out again.
See, Cyclic just cut out
Have you
again.
had your,
Sorry, this is
have
getting
you
so
had your
comedic.
Wait, are you in a
Have you-
flat?
What? No. I am not in a flat.
You're in an actual house?
Yes.
Okay.
have you
Just
had your
asking because a lot of
installation
apartments can
redone?
have bottlenecks if people are home.
Have you had your insulation redone?
Come again?
Um,
Have I had my?
unlikely, Fox. I doubt it's that, but also,
Have you or your
And-
close neighbours had your home's insulation redone?
No, not as far as I'm aware. But we have moved into this house recently,
Because the
so I-
government mandated insulated. It's now Celotex, which is also very fucking reflective when it comes to singles.
we have wired internet.
Which is why in modern houses you get
Alright,
absolutely
wait, question.
appalling.
Are you using Wi-Fi or an Ethernet cable?
Ethernet cable, gentlemen. I think look. We'll just have to work through it. It's fine. We'll just have to. You'll have to let me know when I'm cutting out, and then I can stop, rejig, and then we can go again. That's all we need to do. It's not.
Yep.
It's not that deep.
Restart your PC.
No.
You could also save the multiplayer game real quick, restart your PC, restart your stream, and this,
That would break stream.
and then come back in.
That would make
Um,
stream continuity, and I don't want to do that. Because there's nothing worse for a stream than breaking
Alright.
it in two. You lose all the viewers, and they just don't come back. It happens.
Well, the fact that you've also got the stream and Discord and the game is probably not doing any favors for your upload.
Yeah, you might.
my
you-
internet-
You might
my-
need to
My
think
internet,
about
my internet is fine. I have decent internet. It's
or
fine.
whichever one you prioritize.
Yeah, but
No,
the
people
issue
just
isn't
Download, but
your
what's the
internet.
upload?
It's the hardware itself, by the sounds of it.
There's a right.
Open
I
up
said there's
Task
lots of
Manager and see what
possibilities.
that looks like.
All right, let's get back to the question at hand.
Yeah,
we do
yeah.
have Phoenix here as well.
So, like I said,
I
the
do
thing.
this as a job fleet. I know what I'm
I
talking
personally-
about.
I personally do not see fleet building. Personally do not see Germany building more battleships causing that many problems for the UK, because the UK will just start building more themselves,
Yeah, but like I said, it's
like
more,
they
it's
have
more-
plans for.
Yeah, it's about making the German threat one-dimensional, which means the UK can just crush it, and it's also about giving the Führer false confidence to commit that fleet to Norway so it can be crushed.
Then build more battleships.
That's what I'm going
Also,
to
you got to
do.
bear in mind the British calculation has to balance both dealing with Germany and Japan at the same time.
Oh, no, I
That
know.
was always the calculus the world leader was operating under.
Oh no, I know. I'm
Yeah, I
I'm
wouldn't notice
basically
if you're
trying-
trying to goad them
I'm-
into making aggressive actions, you don't want to make your fleet too weak compared to where it could be.
Yep, I
because
know.
again, you have that Japanese threat to deal with.
I know. I'm trying to force them into actually committing to a proper 3-shift, almost build-up to war build cycle far earlier than they did historically.
Fleet, you're almost completely illegible.
Oh,
Yeah, well, no, he's legible with some words. It's like when you're
It's like every 4 words, it's just gone.
Okay, can I ask a question? Are we talking about this from a British perspective or a German perspective,
a,
please?
German
German.
perspective. I'm
Okay.
the admiral of the German fleet, and bear in mind because I'm working for the Nazis now.
So
I'm
what I'll
trying,
say is,
I'm trying
with
to
their
sabotage them.
with the fleet that they had, they were willing to commit basically their entire surface fleet for the Norway operation. The only reason the Royal Navy didn't crush it is poor timing of troop unload, because they didn't have troop transport, so they had to have their cruisers carry the troops. They didn't have enough for what they needed, so the cruisers were carrying troops. So those cruisers were not available for the Royal Navy to commit to a fleet action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
If they were, the Royal Navy would have put the Kriegsmarine down hard.
I mean, to be honest, they did enough damage as it was. I mean,
They
it's like
crushed
it's
the
like
Kriegsmarine destroyer force.
oh yeah, well even the cruiser force too. I mean, don't forget, like, you know, if you're looking at German naval strength as of the start of the war, right? So they have 4 heavy cruisers. I'm counting the D-lands in. You have 6 light cruisers, and then by 10 June, right, which is after the whole Norway cycle of battles, right? You now have 3 heavy cruisers because you know Graf Svea has been lost, but also Blucher. You've lost 2 light cruisers. And oh yeah, the destroyer force plummeted from 21 destroyers to 10, and that's with an additional ship engine service in that period.
And it was
too.
a good chunk of their modern destroyers that got crunched too.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that was
Fleet
kind
unit
of
destroyers.
that's all they really had, though. I mean, anything that wasn't like a Z, the type 1934 or later, was just a torpedo boat.
Yeah. What I would like to point out is that like the most I can do is perhaps a pair, an additional pair of battleships of some description. Probably closer to large cruisers than full-on battleships is probably the most I can do.
Fleet, there is one way you could really try and sabotage the Germans.
And then,
Capital ships only. No destroyers, no submarines.
That's not going to fly.
That's not how shipyards work.
Yeah, that's not going to fly.
Well, what year
That's
are you
not how
taking over?
shipyards work.
What year do you take over?
at the end of war period, it says.
So after the after,
Okay, 'cause one thing I would suggest is if they screw over the Germans, right? Because the best thing you can do is really what the British and the French wanted, which is to make them build the most like conventional and symmetrical fleet possible, because that'd be the easiest for them to counter, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I would do is when it comes to building the pre-dreadnought replacements, the 10,000-ton ships, become the Panzer Schiff, right?
Yeah.
Instead of building cruisers that are long range, you just build a coastal defense ship, which is exactly what the French and British intended them to build. With the terms set by the Versailles Treaty.
Yeah,
those are going to be pretty useless.
I toyed with the idea because, like, I basically said that I was going to try and do right by Weimar Germany in my mind, build them a semi-decent fleet, but I was going to screw the Nazis aggressively.
Yeah, I mean.
So what I did is we got a trio of 7,700-ton cruisers with 6 5.9-inch guns, but designed to be actually capable of going out in the ocean and not falling over. And then we got the Panzer Schiff with much shorter legs, slightly slower, and actually armored to resist 8-inch shell fire. And, not using diesel engines. Using steam turbines. So actually decent combatants for enemy cruisers rather than pinatas for 6-inch cruiser fire.
I mean, that works.
But
So, for Weimar Germany, all you really need to do is worry about Baltic security.
Yeah.
Because your main threat, and if you're not going to be hostile towards any of the Western powers, right? Your main threat is going to be the Soviets. So.
Yeah. That's what we did.
Well,
the
purpose of
I feel like
those Panzer ships was to take down Ganga.
yes, and
That was sort of what the thinking was, as I recall.
So
the historical ships or the ship's fleet is designing.
The ship's fleet is designing.
A division of them, so like 3 is I think what fleet was saying.
Yeah, a division of 3
together to take down Ganga.
Or alternatively, one of the older French battleships, Britannia's.
Or them plus destroyers or whatever with
Yeah.
Gangut.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's going to be a clean win. It's not. Or at least one or two of the 3 ships are going to be either battered or dead. But so is the enemy capital asset.
So I think that would work against the Soviets because they really couldn't easily concentrate their capital ships. But if against the French, it's not going to work because they organize their battleships by division.
Oh yeah,
so you're not going to face a single French
I
battleship
know.
by itself.
I know.
You're going to get the battle line.
It's more just a hypothetical. Like it's one of those. Yes, this is something that could potentially happen. But meanwhile, all the general staff is sat around going, "No, it's never gonna." Also, no U-boats at all. We don't need U-boats. U-boats, they couldn't win us the last war. We're not going to build any more of them. I'm sorry, Durnitz, get in your hole. Durnitz, get in the hole. Get in the fucking hole,
Fire
Durnitz.
Donut.
No, not firing. I'm putting
Well, if you're able, so when the
Well, if you're
Nazis
not
come in, if you're able to get Hitler's ear, you can solve the Durnitz problem really quick.
Oh,
Called
yeah.
The SA.
Oh, I know. That's the
Butcher.
plan.
I know, obviously, you wait until war starts, they just send him to the Eastern Front.
Well, no, that
Put him
Now
on
the
Bush and
the
put him
SA
in
beats him
Norway.
beats him to death in the street. Like
Yep. Yeah, this is just, which means that which means
this is Nazi Germany. That happened.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. So basically, I'm gonna build up a big, strong surface fleet. I'm gonna build a pair of warmed over Panzer ships. So I'm gonna build a pair of 30 knot. So based on my original design, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a second turret, a third turret, and make them just much warmed over 30 knot ships with armor to just about resist their own 11-inch guns, and say these are the first of our new generation of capital
not
ships.
sure you're gonna do. Oh, so basically you're gonna do the Scharnhorst effectively.
Oh no! With
They're
the
not
old,
bad ships.
No, cyclic with the old 11-inch guns and slower and not protected against 14-inch shell fire like the Scharnhorst are.
Correct, because now the Nazis are in power, which means our goal is sabotage.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Then I will because these ships will raise the British eyebrow, but it also gives me an extra pair of capital ships because I'm building them earlier than the Scharnhorst, so I can lay them down earlier. The Scharnhorsts will then be laid down as historical, which will then start raising alarm bells, and then the Bismarcks just deliver the final hammer blow of, oh good lord, the Germans are going to have 6 capital ships.
Oh, you could do something better than the Bismarcks if you want to sabotage.
Then what if we
Oh,
use
yeah.
Take the
seawater
Scharnhorst hull and you give them 3 twin turrets.
Oh no,
That's
I
it.
can.
seawater and
Oh no, I
boiler
can.
feed?
Oh no, I can just, if I'm head of the Kriegsmarine, I can just take the Scharnhorst design team and say stretch the Scharnhorst hull and give me one with 4 twins, thanks. Because the thing is, the Bismarck wasn't designed by the same team that designed the Scharnhorsts. It's
True.
why it's so much heavier and worse. For what it is. If I just tell the team that designed the Scharnhorsts, give me the Scharnhorst but with a 4th turret and 15-inch guns, they will happily do that. And I can probably lay them down even faster than the Bismarcks could be laid down. Which means I might have to... Oh, and just to, add more confusion into the mix, I'm going to lay down a pair of light aircraft carriers of about 12,000 tons, which will be staffed by Luftwaffe aircraft and fly Bf-109Ts exclusively as air defense assets.
You don't get to make that decision.
Oh no!
Well, no, he
Oh,
can
no.
make the choice on the carrier. It just won't ever.
Oh, he
go
can
anywhere.
lay the
He'll
ship
never hit
down,
the
yeah, good
aircraft.
point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And this is the thing, and then you sell
he
to
can lay the
Goring,
ship down. Yeah.
and then you sell to Goring that how wonderful it will be for him to have control over these carriers exclusively, and when they sail and the aircraft on them, and what a brilliant idea it will be that he came up with that I'm totally just doing that he told me to do. You basically feed his ego to sell it to him.
I mean, to be honest, that then puts you in a situation where
The
you
car-
actually have usable ships. The allies are going to react to you laying them down.
Yep.
That's the
So
goal.
all you need, you don't even need to convince Goring of anything. You
Yeah.
just
Well,
lay
I
the
also-
ships down.
It's huge personal
That-
risk to try and
also prob-
go in front of Goring and try and feed his ego because there's a chance he'll just eat you too. But no, I would say that just wouldn't work because even ego aspect aside, he just did not want to put aircraft on ships. Period. It wouldn't matter if he told them lose or lose
Knight.
ships.
Yeah,
He's not
yeah,
going to care.
yeah.
They're
Knight,
not gonna, it's not, it's not
Knight-
gonna go forward
it's
now.
also-
There's no rules of
Knight
language.
681 on YouTube says the BF-190 is a shit fighter. Yeah, that's the point. That's the whole point.
Yeah, but fleet.
Oh, fleet, that's not the
Fleet.
point. The point is there's no aircraft on them, but they're still laid down.
I know.
No,
but
no,
it's the-
you're
You also
forgetting
just
so that's
don't
even
have the time
worse
to
for
work up the
fleet.
carrier before the war, anyways. It's the reality
The
of any of the
fact
German
that-
carrier efforts.
The fact that fleet subordinating himself to the Luftwaffe, which means there's a significant chance he gets shot and someone competent gets put in command.
Oh no! I've offered
Because let's be real,
That's-
you subordinate
that's not-
yourself to
That's
Goring
not what I said.
by
That-
giving Goring by giving Goring control of part of the fleet.
No, I
It's
said
part of the internal issues.
Fleet,
the Nazi
because
state
then
had
he's
of-
going to want escort for these ships if he goes along with them. And so
Oh.
that
and you-
escort is going to thus
Yeah.
be need to be under his control.
Oh yeah, and then
Remember,
and then it
this
spirals.
is Hermann Goring, who managed to shoehorn his way from being
One of the fattest fighter pilots of the era.
to being in an insane asylum to being in charge of procurement, using that to become Commissar of the Luftwaffe, then seizing the authority of the Chief of Staff of the Luftwaffe without actually being a part of the chain of command.
Yeah.
You give him a leg into the Kriegsmarine, he's gonna take the Kriegsmarine off you.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I think Cyclic's suggestion is right. Just lay them down, but they probably won't even go anywhere. I mean, heck, even if they're finished, they'll still be caught up in delays and constant fighting and bitching over what their use is going to be. And to be fair, and since they're only 12,000-ton light carriers designed to do about 26 knots, they might actually get finished. It's not like I'm building Graf Zeppelin.
Let's be real.
Use them as
I mean-
troop carriers for Norway.
Honestly,
Yeah,
that would work.
it's not that, it's
Well, the thing with
It's a
Graf
fight.
Zeppelin is she's built relatively quickly. I mean, she's launched in 38, for example. Like, she was timing-wise not that terrible if the Germans had actually wanted to complete her. It was just she was languished because of the whole aircraft issue, and also the fundamental fact that Germany simply does not have enough time to build a carrier before. Like, no carrier project started from 1935 onwards is going to get into service in time for World War II because you have to go through the whole process of working up the
Yeah.
carrier from scratch, right? You have no experience with naval aviation. This is the problem for the Italians too when it comes to like what kind of carrier design do you have before the war. It's like really, if you're not in the carrier game or you're not starting to get in the carrier game by like 1930, you're cooked.
Yeah, and then basically what I do is I then order the fleets to sea to protect the invasion of Norway, as much of it as can sail, and then I laugh hysterically, privately, obviously, from probably a country retreat I have in Germany, as the fleet gets annihilated by the Royal Navy.
I will say, there is one very big problem with this, is that if Hitler does realise that this fleet is not as good as it could be, you're probably on the chopping block.
Oh no, Dragon! It's supposed to.
Why is it fleeing Germany?
Oh no, Dragon! It's supposed to be a competent fleet to force the British to actually take the build.
Yes, but if then your competent fleet then gets utterly butchered.
Yes, yes, and then to be fair, as soon as the fleet sails for Norway, I'm going on a diplomatic mission to Switzerland to check on the bank
You
accounts
can't.
of the Kriegsmarine.
You
No,
can't.
That's not how
You're
that
not.
works.
That's not how this works, Fleet.
Is there any way I can
Your
leave
Case of the
Germany?
SS
Your
would
travel
like
is
a word.
controlled.
Yeah, it's the fact that all your communication's going to be bugged and checked by the SS.
All you can
The
do
only
is write
person they didn't do that
diary and-
into is Goring, because Goring had his own wiretapping service.
all you can do is write a personal diary, hide it somewhere, and hope history
so
remembers
here-
you more
here's what you
longer
do.
than the Nazis will.
You do what my family did. You tell them you're going camping in the German side of the Alps, and then you just keep hiking until you're across
You're
the
gonna
border.
go with a guard because they wouldn't want you to be targeted.
Like, if you are, you know, the head of the Kriegsmarine development,
You
they're not
can't
going to
go
let you go
camping
that
during the
easily.
war.
Hey. Well, I guess I guess I basically positioned myself to try and pull a Dönitz. I continue fighting the good fight against the British until the end of the war, become the Führer, and then immediately surrender. I mean, that's
Basically,
the
it's
best
going
I
to be
can
not
hope
so
for.
fun times for you.
It's either that or you get conscripted to a naval battalion and sent to the Eastern Front.
Considering I'm the one
If
who
you've lost
controls
your fleet.
the naval battalion. Like, bear in
You
mind,
don't
that
get
is
to make
fear.
that decision, Fleet.
yeah.
Not
Yep.
Somebody above you can make that decision for you. Or they can just walk in and have you shot.
I mean, Raider
Which
managed to
is for
survive.
Führer when he
just about.
realizes that his entire surface fleet is not.
Yeah,
useful.
but social skills, Fleet.
Yeah, Raider was also politically useful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I did my duty for the good of the world. I'm not...
You tried. Well, no, you tried. We'll at least give you that much.
You tried, but I'll be honest, you probably didn't change anything.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I
mean,
gave...
reality
well,
is.
hey,
You
I
tried,
did
but
something.
you're the sort of
Well, no.
leader that
Oh, no, I did something.
we would laugh at on Ramblings.
I did
The reality is the German surface fleet, as it was already pretty terribly optimized for war
Yeah.
against the British.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it was basically everything that Germany actually had was just designed in the context of a war with France or a war with the Soviets, but not with the British. You know, Plan Z was the whole. This is what we need if we fight the British, and regardless of what you want to say about Plan Z, right? Basically, none of it was implemented. So it just almost doesn't matter, historically speaking.
Yeah.
And the German fleet was just far too symmetrically oriented to be effective against the Royal
Yeah.
Navy, which is really what the British wanted out of the whole
Well-
1935 agreement. Be a symmetrical
Well-
navy. Be easy for us to beat.
Spontaneous scuttle in the harbor.
Well, I did do one good thing in this timeline, gents. I did create the second Battle of Jutland and give one proper battleship on battleship engagement during the Norwegian campaign, which history could then marvel at.
Well, you hope that's what you'll get.
Well, you never know.
Assuming
What-
something like a T class
So-
doesn't just come
yeah.
and go,
And the
hello!
fleet, also, the fleet air arm might like a word with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, is it the K class?
So the next
And it is the
question.
T class you're thinking of,
Yeah.
though.
Next question. How would you modernize the Nagato class battleships if you were in charge of the reconstruction, and what would you do differently than historical? Nothing. To be blunt, the Japanese did it. The Japanese, with all of their modernizations of their dreadnoughts, the Fusos, the Iseis, and the Nagatos, did about as good and thorough a job as they were physically able to do. I'm not joking. They did.
Yeah, I broadly agree with that.
There is nothing I can
Yeah,
do
the
that will
Japanese,
improve them.
unlike the Germans, have their heads screwed on right.
Yeah.
Well,
Mostly.
Well, there are a couple contentions one could
Their
make with
heavy
that, but as far as-
cruisers are a little questionable.
those Japanese supersized Tillmans.
I mean, Yamato is frankly pretty questionable in a lot of aspects, but no, I think the rebuilds, honestly, they did about as good a job as anyone could have expected, given what they had on hand, and and granted, they could also play fast and loose with how much tonnage was being used to increase the ships, and in what aspects, but yeah, they were perfectly good considering what they're working from, which in the case of the Izes and Fusos and such is not exactly the most stellar of designs.
They weren't that bad. I'd argue they were better than most of the standards in terms of overall usage. than utility.
No,
That is extremely questionable.
that is
That is a
really, no.
impressive claim. A
Right
very
up there with
brave
the claim
claim.
of Hosh being able to hit something.
Don't forget, most of the standards is newer than Fuso. And
I mean, are we looking at that as a view of the battle line speed?
I just look at the standards and I see slow, fat MacGuffins that are very tough and effective ships.
You're not right.
But not.
You're not wrong that they are slow.
But
only
They're
as fast as
slow,
your
sure,
slowest
but
ship.
you still have to deal with them. Because that's the fleet speed of the U.S. fleet. It's going to come at you at that speed. It doesn't really matter that you're faster. Because it's going to still be a cohesive unit. You can't really split them off.
Good point.
Especially the fact that
That's why it works.
If the U.S. is on the offensive, the standard line is coming straight for you. You have no choice but to tell them.
They will probably be trying to slowly encircle you until you can't run away anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even just
but
that,
at that
but
point
also
they're split up. So
for the context the U.S. Navy was
No, they're not
operating
going to be encircling. They're just going to be driving for their objectives, and at some point you're going to have to engage.
Yeah, because this is the thing. I think the way everyone expected the Pacific War to go, right, is tactical speed was less important than, say, sheer sailing range and endurance. Because the U.S. Navy, no matter what, had to get all the way across the Pacific, and it was always going to be moving as a cohesive unit. This is why the Japanese strategy ultimately boils down to how do we attrit the Americans away sufficiently over the course of that entire campaign to where, we can actually have the battle line go in and stand a reasonable chance of winning. Which, to be fair, does partially dictate why the Fusos and the IZs have, 6 twin turrets as opposed to a more coherent layout, but because they were banking on having to split fire. But, the whole tactical speed advantage thing is kind of meh, especially because the IZs aren't exactly that much faster.
Yeah.
It's only 2 knots if I remember.
Like 23 and maybe 24 knots if you push it.
Yeah, they're as far as I'm concerned, after rebuilt, they're about equivalent to the rebuilt QEs in terms of utility. The Fusos and the Issei's. The Nagatos are actually superior to the rebuilt QEs once rebuilt. The exception, of course, is when we start bringing things like radar gunnery into it. But
I wonder why a ship that's so much later than the Queen Elizabeth is slightly better.
Well, the Fusos and the Issei's are equivalent, I'd say. But
I wouldn't.
Why not?
14-inch guns.
Yeah.
They have.
What is it? The Royal Navy's 15-inch gun was still a very significant threat. The Japanese 14-inch gun, much less of a threat.
a 14-inch gun is still a 14-inch gun, though.
But also that gun is much worse performing than the 15-inch.
Now, to be fair, fleets say utility-wise.
Utility-wise?
It's as capable as...
Still rate the QEs higher, personally.
I would rate the QEs higher. Because part of their rebuilds, part of their modernization is the fire control, is the radar. Like, you can't separate that out.
To be fair, the IZs did have their fire control upgraded considerably. Granted, well, I guess for the battleships, their fire control systems were fine. For the cruisers, it was a little bit different story. But regardless, on the point of utility, I feel like there's something to be said for the fact that the Royal Navy actually did employ their battleships.
Yes.
That's
which is more on the operational aspect than the actual usage, than the actual designs.
Like the Nagatos and the Fusos and these had so many cases where they could have been used, but doctrine and tactical, doctrine prevented it. Like there were so many cases where they could have been useful for the Japanese war effort, but were not used because of the way the Japanese were thinking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
or their understanding of the battle space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even just looking at their late bits in 44...
Is there a way we could have employed the Fusos?
Yeah, honestly, if you make... the Fusos and the Yeesees less so, but the Nagatos could have been used at Guadalcanal. They're just after rebuild fast enough to dash in and out during before the aircraft can get them.
No. I don't know about that one.
It's not worth the risk.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a risk, and that's why they didn't.
And if you think about it...
Just fast enough. Now imagine if you start taking 8-inch shell fire outside of your main belt up near your bow or near your stern. And that starts causing flooding, which lowers your speed. Just fast enough doesn't cut it.
Generally, the Congos also didn't really fare very well when they're trying to get out.
Anything, fleet.
Guadalcanal was a cruiser-destroyer fight.
Yeah.
Well, generally
if you did that,
speaking,
you might save Mutsu from her fate. You might have her sunk by the US instead of blowing up.
To be fair, even using her
But you
ammunition...
still blow up dragons, so you
No,
don't
even-
change the fate.
No, even as long as
Even though you've at least gave another kill tally to the US.
As long as Fuso uses her ammunition and has it restocked, it removes one of the major theories for why she exploded. Degraded powder going off.
This assumes she gets back.
If she
That's one of the theories.
Yeah, I know there are others, but it makes it less likely she explodes. Anyway, we've sort of hammered this into the ground, basically. We've got really off topic. What would you have changed in the design of Ranger CV4 when she was still in the design stage? Build a
Give her a
Yorktown.
torpedo magazine.
Build a Yorktown.
You can't
I mean,
build a Yorktown
fleet. They don't know what a Yorktown is.
No,
Yeah.
Ranger's the ship that literally
led to the
that
Yorktown.
precedent. You literally the only realistic improvement that can be done is to give her a torpedo magazine.
Yeah.
I actually forget if they even had the spare tonnage, to be
They're-
honest.
they're-
They might
Or
not
they're
have.
operating within
The
the
reason
confines.
Ranger's a one-off.
Like the
Yeah,
like the one problem
they
the US
very
Navy
well
had,
may not have.
the one problem the US
Um,
Navy had when it came to carriers, because the Lexington and Saratoga were great bases to build off of for carriers, but they
They were just
left
giant.
very little tonnage left over. They were able to keep them, and that was great, but the tonnage they had still counted against their overall carrier limits, and that really made things very tight for them.
Geek.
I think I have this chart. I think I have this charted out somewhere. It's always a spreadsheet for something. It's just
Yeah,
I can find
I
the bloody
think
thing.
you've all hit the the nail on the head. Just give her a torpedo magazine, basically, and then have all her other flaws lead the way
Hopefully.
for Yorktown.
No, I do not have.
And they may not have been able to give her a torpedo magazine.
Yeah, I know.
With the
I'm not familiar with Ranger enough.
tonnage.
Increase her from
It's
17,250 to
relatively simple.
23,000 tons.
Ranger is basically, in terms of development, it's
It's
similar
the
to-
US's first attempt at a purpose-built carrier with very severe tonnage restrictions.
Yeah.
Because of the
If I'm
treaties.
reading this correct, they had
Makes sense.
69,000 long tons to work with. There's 4 different ideas drawn up of 3 sets of 23,000, 4 17,250, and 5 13,800. So you try and build her outright to be one of these bigger carriers and potentially work out how the rest of it's going to go. This potentially would work, but then at that point you're not rebuilding Ranger, you're getting an entirely different ship.
And you're also impacting, because remember, the US is going into this with a belief of they need X number of carriers as well to do the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also part of the equation
Yeah.
as to why Ranger was smaller than them. Looking at it, because Ranger is the one that. Okay, so hang on a second here. Yeah, so after Ranger, which was designed for 13,800 tons, it left 55,200 tons, which was what allowed Yorktown and Enterprise. So you can have a larger Ranger, it's just you kill the Yorktowns. You need a smaller Yorktown class.
Yeah.
Next one then, Fleet.
To be fair, nothing was really wrong with Ranger when it's operating in the Atlantic.
And honestly, I kind of quite like Ranger, honestly, for what she is.
She's still
Yeah, she's not great.
fundamentally- Yeah,
Also, she's
she's
almost
still
cute.
fundamentally a fairly capable combat unit and contributed pretty decently in the war.
Yeah, ask Sean Barr.
No, it's just
Nothing
a question.
bad.
It's a question of what you're trying to build the carrier to do, and then in the case of the U.S. Navy, they were very Pacific oriented because the Japanese were the main threat, and so in that context, Ranger was largely a failure, because they weren't really trying to create a second line carrier with her, but there was a lot of difficulties and lessons being learned about how carrier aviation worked. In particular, in this era, there was a debate between whether or not air power should be concentrated on fewer ships. Which is it becomes a question of, what is the effective difference in survivability versus more smaller ships with less aircraft and reduced sortie rates versus a fewer, number of larger carriers with higher sortie rates and a higher overall depth on deck in terms of how many fighters they can put up and such.
And how can you escort all these ships?
That's also a factor too, yeah. Which in the case of the U.S. Navy ultimately resolved itself in the favor of larger carriers like the Yorktowns and Essexes. And you know we all know where that went. But Ranger was also somewhat of an expression of the sort of lower end of the idea of having a more distributed carrier force.
So, I think we've pretty much hammered that one home. Next question is, why didn't the British scrap the floating hulk of Derflinger for metal since they were badly hurting for it during the war? I don't know. If you want the honest answer to that question, I have no idea.
Because it probably wouldn't actually, like,
It's
the metal from Derflinger
questionable.
wouldn't be that useful.
It's going to be questionable quality of metal by that stage. You've been that thing's been left out there for like 20, 30 years.
Almost, like 25 years or potentially. It's been sort of 20 years from the start of it and later. Like
You could probably harvest something out of it,
No!
but
I mean,
that's gonna be a
scrap
lot
is
of-
scrap, no matter where it's been.
Well,
I mean,
No,
you've
it's
got to
not
consider that
will
metallurgically.
rust it away.
there's plenty of scrap metal on the British Isles. It's specific metals that we're having issues with.
Yeah.
And sort of those wrecks at Jutland don't really become valuable until post-atomic era.
Yeah.
Or stuff like Geiger counters. And that's just not there in World War II.
There's no real need to scrap them. Also, it's not exactly a quick and easy process to scrap a ship, actually.
You're basically...
Amount of time.
You're
Yeah.
also having to dedicate people that could be doing other things to.
You're going to have to refloat... Oh, first of all, you're going to have to refloat her to move her to somewhere that she actually can be scrapped. Which that'll take time. Hope nothing's happening in terms of Germany, trying to notices and bomb anything that happens.
Oh yeah, you're basically painting a
Bring it
giant
back to
target on
the
Scarborough
army,
Flow
spend
saying...
a couple of years to scrap it.
Yeah, you're basically painting a target on Scarborough Flow and saying, bombing raid now.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're
but
probably
Scapa
not.
always had that.
You're probably
There's
not.
more important things to hit.
Yeah, there's far more important things to hit. This honestly, if you're Germany, you're like, yeah, go ahead, waste your time, manpower, and on this. This is not going to help you. Like, that's the end result of why they didn't do it.
Yeah.
It was pointless.
It's a rounding error on a lot of the metals that the UK could get otherwise. If you're say like Japan or Italy, where you're a much more hard strain for getting high quality ore and steels, then scrapping an older ship like that is valuable and makes a difference. It's a couple more destroyers, right? In the case of the UK, it's really not that relevant. There's specific metals that they were short on that there are other easier ways of finding it or acquiring it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they were still connected to the empire at large and also the very large economic engine that was both the United States and also, all of Latin America. So it was just a question of, anything that comes in has to get by the Western approaches and the U-boats, but...
Yeah. How come Enterprise had 4 rudders when all large fleet carriers after the Essexes had twin rudder setups? I assume he's talking about the nuclear-driven Enterprise. Given he says after Essexes, which means he can't be talking about CV6.
If we're talking about mobile Chernobyl,
I want to make
there's a lot of things they learned on that ship, like not needing to go a 1-for-1 boiler to reactor.
This is a joke to be made here about the ratio between boilers and rudders on the ship.
Oh.
But anywho.
Oh, mobile Chernobyl. That's a nickname.
I like that name. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Nah, but that got a chuckle out of all of us.
Could be worse. Could be the Lenin.
Take the enlarged Taiho design and improve it based on hindsight of what we currently know about Japanese carrier doctrine and what could have been changed to make the ship more effective.
I'll be like Lenin at sea.
Enlarged Taiho.
Taiho,
Which one?
In particular,
one,
I presume.
Yeah, which one? There's a few.
G50? Or is it the other one I'm thinking of? Because there's two main ones. There's G15, which I think eventually shows itself as Hakuryu, and then you've got the other design.
Eventually shows herself.
I mean, honestly, at that point, given Japanese doctrine, what G15 basically
G14, which is a larger design overall. The improved Taiho Type 15 never started due to critical shortage.
The only thing you can really do with an enlarged, improved Taiho to improve it even further, like, I don't need an angled flight deck. It is far too early for that, and it would actually be a hindrance rather than a help. I can't really do much with AA firepower because I have 25 mil. The only thing I can really do is exclusively mount the 10cm gun in single or twin mounts as my AA weapon to increase anti-aircraft firepower. There's no point meaningfully increasing the size of the ship because the air wing's already coming close to that number where if you go any higher, you'll have problems managing the bloody thing. So...
Yes, G15 was meant to be about 50,000 tons upwards. They plan to make them bigger quite significantly.
Yeah, this is the thing. At that point, we're approaching the size where you go, there's not really anything I can do to improve it. The Japanese are already doing everything they need to do to improve it to fit their carrier doctrine. Even without the benefit of hindsight, they're making the right calls because that's just the way it is.
Well, fundamentally speaking, they hit gold with Shokaku. And pretty much all they have to do is just make adjustments to the Shokaku design, and
and that's what they're doing.
And,
that's what they're doing. Taiho was an iteration on Shikaku, and the follow-on after her was an iteration on after her, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would say the thing with Japan's carrier arm is less the carriers themselves and more just the doctrine around them and how they handle the aviators. I think is really probably you make up more ground changing that than you do changing carrier design overall. I mean, granted, just improvements to still be made, I'm sure, but
and
I'm
even
not
then,
a Japanese carrier design expert though. But
I mean, and even then, as we say, there's not really that much you can really do.
What, in terms of how the Japanese approach naval aviation, or
no? I mean, in
carriers?
terms of improving the carrier,
improving the ship itself, which is basically nothing much. Most of the problems now is just down to crew handling and just.
Do we know what was to come after? Do we know what was to come after the Ibuki class heavy cruisers, or was the class the last one planned? Well, it's the last one that we know about. Like, and presumably the Japanese would have had something after it, but they didn't get far into building the Ibukis, so we don't know. And then, of course, they had the whole panic attack of, the Second World War, so heavy cruisers kind of dropped away in importance. Also,
they did that whole burn all our documents thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even so much as
there were some initial thoughts, we probably will never know about them.
So, the way this essentially boils down to, is really, it's how designs go through stages in naval plans and such. Because obviously the Japanese were thinking about, we need something beyond Ibuki. Obviously they had much larger expansion plans. How realistic they were is another story. But the main problem we run into is the next designs they were considering were, I believe, going to be part of Circle 6 expansion, the fleet expansion plan. And that basically, they just started thinking about that and saying, we want like something like this right before all the major reversals in 1942. And so the entire thing was scrapped. So we know they were probably thinking about another cruiser design. They probably also had no time to, probably never got any further than maybe sketching out maybe vague requirements like, has 12 guns or something like that. And then the whole effort would have been just ended, which is, I think it's one of those things that some people will see that, like, a design was contemplated and assume that there was a design there that is actually completed, or that, has complete specifications at the very least. And often that's just not the case. It's, I have concepts of a plan sort of a thing. And nothing more than that.
We think this may be what we want. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things like, okay, so we need a new heavy cruiser division in this next plan, or we need a division of new ships, or a division worth of new ships to replace these old obsolescent ships. Ergo, we want something probably,
we want
better
to
heavy
start-
cruisers, but like
yes.
they might not have actually gotten. They probably just did not get to the point of actually defining what those better cruisers were going to be.
Yeah,
And this is actually
we're
where.
at the what do we want them to do phase.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where Senjo / Zhao from World of Warships comes from, or rather, there's a magazine article she's based off of that was essentially trying to conceptualize what this Fleet Expansion Plan 6 cruiser would have looked like, based off of essentially no information, and the design is not very accurate because they don't follow Japanese design practice very closely. But granted, when that design was drawn up for that magazine was, a couple sagas of historiography into Japanese design earlier than where we are today. So, anywho.
It's also hard to say the heavy cruiser being not very effective for the Japanese. They honestly probably will continue building more, mostly because they need it.
Yeah, I mean that was as far as we can tell, that was their intention. More heavy cruisers because they were quite important to the night battle plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, Japan's empire is expanding. You're gonna need those ships because their light cruisers are not really, proper.
I would say it's almost like one of those things where the Japanese approach the question, at least, because this is kind of I find retroactively we tend to separate light cruisers and heavy cruisers more than we should, because of the whole light and heavy thing, which is really like not as sharp of a distinction back in the day. For almost every navy involved, all the 8-inch cruisers were light cruisers. And the term heavy cruiser only really pops up because of the London Naval Treaty, and that's not even widely used too. Like the British just call them cruisers. The Japanese, the French do not have a term for heavy cruiser. They only become popular after World War II. Really, it's only the Americans and the Italians that really use the term at that point in time. There's just to a certain degree, they're just cruiser designs that fill the specific purpose of whatever that design is. It's not so much the case of is this a heavy cruiser or a light cruiser, and is the role very different. So in the case of the Japanese, right, they just said we want frontline fighting cruisers. They require 8-inch guns and to be 10,000 plus tons, and these are our Type A cruisers. They weren't really that interested in having lighter, light cruisers in the way that we think of for a lot of other European navies. They only really wanted to build Mogami with 6-inch guns because they had no choice, but they still said, okay, this has to have the same fighting capacity as the 8-inch cruisers. So when you look at their later designs for second line cruisers that have smaller guns, it's like flotilla leader for submarines or maybe for destroyers and such, and they don't really put that much effort into them because they're just not that important. They really would just prefer to have more and more of these large 8-inch cruisers.
Okay, first thing, 1 second, I had to take a quick aside. Knight, what on earth are you talking about? I'm not pushing lies and fake news. I never said Fuso blew up.
I think you might have actually.
You misspoke. Fuso.
You did. You misspoke.
But that's not. But please don't accuse me of spreading lies and fake news.
Yeah, that is a bit of a.
That's uncalled for. That's
It is
uncalled
indeed
for.
But I think you
Alternative
meant as a
facts.
joke.
Yeah, not with the way it's phrased.
Lies, false news. Clearly, it's alternative facts. But in reality, Knight, misspeaking is not lies and false news. It's an honest mistake.
Happens all the time, even in very, very important settings, and people find a way to move on.
The amount of time in modern naval panel discussions at Surface Navy Association or dim decks or stuff like that you see people misspeak, it happens all the time. Move on.
Or heads of state.
Yeah.
If we had a rap
sometimes it completely changes either the name of a program, F-35, or in that case it wasn't a head of state, but it was a political appointee, I believe. Or it spawns an entirely new program that probably was just originally a batch 2 of a pre-existing frigate.
That's the best description
Why
of
do you
speaking
think
I've
there's
ever heard.
more to that than might initially be thought?
Anyway.
That last one is Boris Johnson in Type 32, in all likelihood.
Oh. How come?
Fun.
Since Ganaiza was in dry dock for a complete rebuild after having her bow destroyed, would it be better to just repair her to her previous specs with an augmented anti-aircraft battery rather than give her 15-inch guns? Yes. Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. It would have been quicker, more convenient, and given the Kriegsmarine back a capital asset that they spent the rest of the war without. It's that simple.
Navy gets to build towers instead of the RAF.
Yeah, it's nice to have a really simple question that is a one-sentence answer. For once. Next question is the next question is a bit of a weird one, but
Go for it.
it's more the lack of context, because I don't quite know what to make of it. Maybe some of you will know what to make of it. How come Javelin was towed back to England instead of being scuttled? Wouldn't the destroyer and frigate spam make up for the loss of one ship? Without context, I've got no clue.
What, HFS Javelin?
He just says Javelin, it doesn't say HMS. I don't know what he's on about.
I'm guessing it's HMS Javelin.
Anyone got any...
That can only possibly really be referring to the Javelin, I've thought.
What are we?
I think the thing is, it happened right off of Plymouth, so it was really, really easy to bring her back. And you have a complete ship, you might as well repair it, because don't forget, destroyer machinery is expensive. Like, it's not like destroyers are relatively cheap compared to other ships, but you still have to pay for upfront for a lot
The
of
machinery is a huge part of their cost.
Yeah. I mean, for destroyers, it can be up to like half the cost. I mean, it's kind of obscene, but because it's all high speed, low weight turbines. So
why lose ship when? But it basically comes down to simply why lose ship when ship can be saved.
It's
destroyers. Also, why you have several destroyers in the war get
she
together.
Just off to Plymouth. She lost both her bow and stern, losing over 200 feet of length, but managed to stay afloat and was towed back to harbour.
And thankfully, the bow and stern do not have a lot of the most vital and most expensive kit on the ship.
For God's sake.
Actually, a picture of her bow, of what it looks like after it's been... not her bow, her stern being blown off.
For fuck's sake. There's a difference between, as we said before, there's a difference between misspeaking and deliberately spreading false information. Just because I said something that was false does not mean it was attempting to spread lies.
Hang on, I got this.
Knight. And to be blunt,
part of being a basic person is understanding when there is an honest mistake. Understand what you're saying, what somebody else is saying.
And if you do,
that does not make something a lie or false news. It is quite literally a misspeak that none of us caught.
Would also say, because I can't quite see the exact wording of it, but if you're trying to be tongue in cheek, you got to bear in mind that it does not translate very well over text. So, in case we feel like we're overreacting here, I don't know. I can't quite see the exact wording.
Yeah, if that was tongue in cheek, whether it was or not, that doesn't translate. And I'm treating it like it was not. Because you have been very clear in how wedded to the idea you were.
Could HMS Canberra, just get back on topic, could HMS Canberra have been saved if she was towed out of the area? That's a question that is lacking context. Please tell me somebody has the...
What, like towing her out of the environment?
You keep saying these are lacking context. They're not.
This isn't lacking context. I'm going to take the wild assumption we are talking about the heavy cruiser.
Yes.
This is referring to
fair,
because this is kind of the only one this really applies to.
If we're talking about, if we're looking at mechanical issues, we could also mean the modern LHDs. Just saying.
But they really need saving?
Those could be saved by a expansion of the maintenance line item of the Royal Navy.
Australian.
Or Australian Navy. Either one. Because, to be honest, the Royal Navy needs LHDs too.
Scuttled after heavy damage of the Battle of Savo Island. So
yes, that ship, yes, he could have been saved and likely would have
From what I understand,
if there had not been a series of miscommunications and misjudging of timing.
Yeah, from what I understand, she wasn't scuttled. She was hit by a friendly torpedo, and she couldn't correct.
He was scuttled afterwards to send her down faster. Once they abandoned ship and gave up.
Fundamentally, the crew was basically saying, "I don't think we could actually save this either way, so let's just sink her faster."
No, they were under orders to pull out by X time. And if they could not get her going by that amount of time, then they were to scuttle her. The problem is that time judgment comes from a miscommunication about unloading transports and unloading X amount of supplies and getting the transports ready to go. They had more time, and there's a good chance they would have gotten her into a towable condition. But the reality is, war is messy. There's a reason there is a term, the fog of war. Stuff like this happens.
Relatively speaking, her damage wasn't that bad. She was listing and had some fires, but it's mostly that her main engines were knocked out, which, honestly, even the ships there could probably have towed her out. But these things happen.
Yeah, this is war. It's not always.
You have to get her into a condition where she's safe to tow, and a warship on fire with ammunition.
They also didn't.
A torpedo impact is not necessarily towable.
I would also note that
dragging your mic.
There's also the possibility, rather than a torpedo hit, that it could have also been one of the Type 91 shells, because don't forget the heavy cruisers had the delayed action fuse on those that are obscenely long, and it's possible that it could have been another water detonation from one of those as well. So.
Probably.
Next question. Are there any known specs for the French 16-inch gun planned for the Alsace design number 2? I don't know. That's honest answer. I have no idea. They're probably
not necessarily in English, but quite plausibly in French.
Probably there might be in one of the French archives, but again, don't quote me on that.
Is this a question from Discord or YouTube?
I have no idea. That's not saved on
We know from Discord. We know there are entries for the French artillery archives that do mention more modern 16-inch guns. It's just I don't know if anyone's been able to follow it up and see if there are any plans available or not. So
ask around in ship talk if this is from Discord. There may be somebody in there who can help you.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that Richelieu is listening in. I might be able to offer in anything in text chat if they know. So they are more familiar with French designs than I am.
Because I know the whole idea
Richelieu is listening.
Gun was only found in Soviet guys.
Hang on, because it's replying me right now. One 16-inch gun was made by boring out a 34 centimeter, which would be. So I guess there's that. Was that for testing, or is it meant to be act as a prototype, or for testing shells? Okay.
The next question doesn't ask much. You're in control of the Imperial Japanese Navy during World War II. What would you do?
Not convince the Japanese government that it's death or attacking the United States. Take the risk. But at the same time, you're kind of just delaying how screwed you are.
Yeah. I think the first thing to do is to... assuming I have control from the start, that includes giving the order to attack Pearl Harbor. I know this is going to sound weird, but the problem is that it's almost better, given that I know how effective the Kidabutai is going to be, to not hit the Pacific Fleet on a Sunday. and wait for the declaration of war to actually be delivered.
So,
I mean, regardless of that, you just don't declare war in the United States.
Well, yeah, I know that, but...
Oh, then you get into the whole complicated question of how do you change
You
the
take the
entire
risk.
domestic, to do the entire course of Japanese
That's the
domestic
problem, I know.
politics, which is, yeah.
Yeah, you can't.
Just
I mean,
like
really, I think
Yamamoto was sitting there going, "I will resign if we don't."
Yeah, and it's kind of one of
Contrary
those
to
things
popular
where
belief.
you don't want to call it as a foregone conclusion, but there was, to a lot of degree in the Japanese side, just a inevitability of what was going to happen that nobody was really interested in fighting because the zeitgeist was just so set on, we will have our expansion war in China and we will fight the Western powers, and the United States is an enemy we must confront, and therefore there really wasn't much of a way of forestalling what was going to happen. Because otherwise, I would say if you got to go to war with the United States, one route, the route I would suggest is, surrender earlier, right? Try and find a way to have a peace process sooner.
Yeah.
That way, Japan is not so heavily devastated. But you're just never going to get that.
No,
not with the way Japanese domestic politics were.
I know.
This is one of those things where the changes have to happen like the 1920s and 1910s, and you have to go way further back.
It's one of those things like
you're in a war you're doomed to lose, and the longer you make the war go on, the harder you lose.
Yeah, I know. It's just there's no like I can inflict more damage on the USN.
Welcome to the Axis problem.
Yeah, I can absolutely inflict more damage on the USN. I can absolutely extend the war with foreknowledge. But all that does is make me lose harder because the friendly atom is coming, no matter what else happens.
Even without that, even if you delay the Marianas, right? Which is what made that possible. Even if you delay that, okay, great, it's 1948.
The US is angry.
You're screwed.
Well, not even that. I mean, I think the
A chunk of the Royal Navy is also there, which isn't fun for you either.
Well, also, how long? What is your merchant shipping presently like? How badly is the submarine campaign now hollowed you out? How many millions of Japanese are starving in the home islands now? Also, don't forget that once the war in Europe is done, the Soviets are going to be coming for Manchuria and Korea, and probably will push further down into China as well because they can. And while they might not be as much of a threat in terms of landing against Japan, unless the Americans do just give them much more in the way of amphibious kit, you're still going to this degree of Soviet expansion in the eastern part of Asia is going to be considerably greater. Yeah, it's an ugly situation all around. I mean,
like I said, there's nothing I can do. Did the Thai Navy do anything in World War II?
Yeah, actually, they fought the French.
Oh yeah, there was that battle, wasn't there? Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, what's the name of it?
I'm gonna butcher it because I don't do Thai very well. But hang on a second.
But one of their coast defense ships engaged.
Kochang?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the Japanese-built a couple of the Japanese-built coastal defense ships
engaged a French 6-inch light cruiser.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was some French Afisos there as well. But French naval victory. Just the unfortunate reality for all French Far East defense planning. Essentially, there was no real way to do anything about Japan, and thus the Japanese were able to force peace terms that were favorable to them onto the French. But that was kind of sort of a given. As far as French imperial planning went for Indochina, it was we'll defend against the Thailand because that was recognized as a potential threat, but against Japan there was really not much more that could be done other than diplomatic maneuvers. There was some discussion of, hey, do we try and stand up independent production of aircraft and other armaments in Indochina? But this wasn't very realistic. Europe demanded too many resources.
Yeah,
it was actually, I remember reading this one exchange where Darlan in 1938 or 39 was very angry that the British wanted to reduce the Mediterranean fleet to go and reinforce the Far East fleet, because he was very uncomfortable with the balance of power in Europe in the Mediterranean relative to the Italians, because he also had the Germans to deal with, and that was sort of always the French nightmare scenario: is how do you handle having a German navy resurgent when you also have the Italians in the Mediterranean, and how much do I really trust the British to back me up, which was not exactly a foregone conclusion at that point in time, and Darlan was also something of an Anglophobe, so there's also that angle to keep in mind. But Fun times all around.
Yep. How can Scharnhorst avoid her fate at North Cape? There's only one way. She doesn't go. If she goes to North Cape, she dies at North Cape.
She's walking into a trap.
It's that simple. If she goes to North Cape, she dies.
The battle station was quite fully operational.
Yes.
Quite operational.
And unfortunately, she couldn't close with those Star Destroyers.
Yeah, literally on the bridge.
She didn't last very long.
On the bridge of Duke of York, the Admiral that pulls up the hood, puts on the tab like, "Fire at will, Commander."
Engage tractor beams.
Belfast would like a word with you.
Yeah, bang, bang, bang.
Rapid fire.
Yeah.
We have the range.
Oh, that's a funny joke I wasn't expecting. Oh. It's January 1st, 1939, and Italy wakes up to the new year to 4 Francesco Caracciolo-class battleships in Taranto. How would they react to this sudden growth in their battleship fleet?
Well, we have Phoenix here.
God, that was a butchering. All right, so
the Francesco.
It depends on.
Well, they're all oil fired as built. So
okay, so
there's
that. The problem with the Caracciolo class, right?
Is it Caracciolo? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Francesco Caracciolo.
There we go. That's actually easy to say.
The problem you run into, which is the problem the Italians have with the design, right, is it is basically like a 1912, 1913 design. And the torpedo defense on it is essentially non-existent. The deck armor is very thin.
Mm-hmm.
The Italians went through a lot of effort to try and figure out how to fix this design, which generally resulted in a lot of expense projected, and also just not very successful because it just would layer in too much top weight.
This is why they didn't complete her after the war. Is that right?
Yeah, she was canned before the Washington Naval Treaty was even a thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
They just had no real way to save her, which is kind of the problem you run into. If you have 4 of these things, it's great. It's like, okay, fantastic. They're 28 knot, 4 15-inch gun battleships, but I have to use them in the Mediterranean where the torpedo and air attack risk is extremely high. Oh shit! Also, the original design. The gun elevation is not that high, so you're limited to about 20,000 meters range.
I mean,
so that's also a problem. I mean, granted, they could modify the turrets because they actually did modify one of the turrets for coastal defense, and that could reach 27.3 kilometers.
I mean, they can. So they've got a year and a bit. They've got a year and they've got a year and a half before Italy joins the war to make modifications. But even then, they can't fix the issue with the deck. They can't fix the torpedo defense in that time. In fact, the best use of them is sitting in Taranto, forcing the Littorios to go elsewhere when the British attack, and taking torpedoes that other more valuable units then don't have to take.
Well, I mean, I guess that gets into more specific reasons of how Taranto happened the way it did, which is kind of its own longer discussion. Because part of it is essentially was both degradation of defenses due to weather conditions, but also the fact that the Italians deliberately reduced the defenses because they wanted to sortie the ships quickly because they had an operation planned that morning. And they essentially were calculating the risks and felt that they would be the risk of torpedo attack by aircraft, even though they knew it was coming, was going to be not so high as to really be worth just scrapping the operation or delaying it. But regardless, what you could do in that time, right, is you could, if you have the steel to spare, that is, bulge the ships without. It's gonna reduce their top speed. But you could bulge the ships. You could potentially try and put deck armor on them. You would probably end up stalling out the reconstruction of the Duilio class battleships. So herself and Victoria,
because that's
ongoing at this point in time,
it's still
right?
Not finished, is it?
You could pull material off of them. You could probably provide some improvements to the deck armor. You wouldn't have to worry too much about the top weight concerns if you are bulking out. If you're giving the ships large bulges because it'll increase the stability margins. It's just you're going to lose that top speed. You'll probably drop them to like a 25 knot ship or something like that, depending on exactly how they shake out.
Which is. But even
it's
then,
faster than the British battleships that you're facing for the most part, for what it's worth.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
I'm
quite
still
as fast as
questioning.
you'd like.
I'm still questioning if it's worth. I mean, I know they need reworking to be modern combatants, but could they not fill a second line role and then you actually get the 12.5-inch rebuilds out first before you even consider doing anything with these four?
Well, so it's kind of the problem that you run into is, look, I guess it depends on how you're looking at it, right? Because you could just bore ahead with the second pair of rebuilds, which is what the Italians did do anyways. And you know they're more like they have, compared to the Cavor class rebuilds, right? They're better, they're more optimized. They went through the experience of rebuilding them once. They also, the fire control equipment is all equal to that of the Littorio class for the most part, which was not the case for the Cavor class. So they are more advanced. The problem you run into with them, right, is they're simply not powerful enough to stand up to British battleships in a fight, because the weakest British battleships, right, are still 8-gun Revenge or Queen Elizabeth class battleships. The best shot any of the Italian rebuilds had was if they fight a Renown, where the odds are more even, mostly because the Renown's armor isn't good enough to face off against the Italian guns, but likewise the armor on the Italian rebuilds is just not good enough to deal with the 15-inch guns the British have. But the reason the Cavor class made sense, right, is because they happened well before the new build battleships. They preceded the Littorio class into service by about 3 years. Technically less if you consider workup time, because there's a lot of kinks to work out. But they were there. They were interim solutions that could match Dunkirk, more powerful than the existing French dreadnought battleships. So they worked in that regard. And then the Littorio class came along, where the Duilio class really, there's part of the reason why they're questioned is the logic to why they were rebuilt in the first place, because the ultimate logic was it's a way to get 8 battleships, fine. But they're less capable. They don't do the fill-in for time roll because, quite frankly, they enter service after the first pair of Littorio class. So
I see. I see what you're driving at here.
She becomes fully operational around late September or October of 1940, which is just right around the time Littorio and Vittorio Veneto become fully operational themselves. So Andrea Doria does not become operational until February of 1941. So if you are looking at the point of view, I have these four complete ships, and I want to turn them into something more useful. If I say well, cancel the rebuild because they started in like late 37, so they're about halfway through, right? And I say, okay, so now I can repurpose at least 2 of the Type 4 main battery fire control computers for two of these new battleships, or the two of the 15-inch battleships, right? I bulge them out. I increase the deck armor.
Because you don't
increase the gun elevation.
You don't have
I refit some of the guns. That like you put some of the 90mm turrets on these ships instead of that at least gets me at least 2 modernized, probably workable battleships. I don't know the exact timing of when you're able to get them to service. There's a lot of questions on that I just would not. I just sit in front of a lot of books and forum things to figure out. But
to be blunt, Phoenix, given the fact that yes, you're bulging them, but you don't have to do any engine replacements. You don't have to do any significant reworking of the hull structure. You're not reworking the shafts, you're not reshaping the hull, apart from the bulges, obviously. It's a much easier, faster process than what you're having to do to the Duilios. A year and a half.
You're not as extensively rebuilding them.
I'm sure they can. I'm sure the first pair can be out before Italy enters the war.
I mean, I don't know about that, but at the end of the day, ultimately also, but if you look compared to the process of doing the Duilios, it honestly doesn't matter, because here's the thing: even if they don't arrive earlier than the second pair of rebuilds, the Duilio class, right?
Yep.
They're still more useful because they have heavier belt armor. They have a 300mm belt as opposed to 350mm belt, right? Mm-hmm. Turret face plates are much thicker. You're talking about actually thicker than the Littorio class. Older armor plate, but 400mm, almost 16 inches, right? And you have 15-inch guns, and those are pretty. Those 15-inch guns pack quite a punch. Mm-hmm. They're lower velocity, but they are only fractionally lighter than the 15-inch shells the Littorio class uses. Mm-hmm. And they also have quite a bit of explosive filler. It's kind of an opposite design to the contemporary late 1930s Italian shell designs for battleships. But regardless, so that is something you can send and go fight a Queen Elizabeth, and it'll probably do a lot better than any of the rebuilds. And that is, that does make up for quite a bit of the problems that the Italians had. when you look at the balance of power in terms of battleships, because no rebuild could really directly stand up against a British ship. That's why, for example, at Calabria, Punta Stillo, right, Campione is only willing to engage the British ships because he knows he has a speed advantage, even though he's, it's 3-2 in terms of battleships in favor of the British, but the advantage of the British is even greater because he simply does not have nearly as easy of a time getting through their armor as they will to him. So once Giulio Cesare is hit and she loses speed, he's like, okay, I've lost my speed advantage. I can't control the range. I also don't know exactly how badly damaged she is.
We're getting out
I have
here.
to
We're
end
going.
it here
We're going.
because it's too much risk. Because those were also at that point in time, right? Because this is the summer of 1940, the only 2 operational Italian battleships, which actually, even if you extrapolate to the entire European theater, July 1940, or the late July 1940, there are actually no other operational Axis capital ships because all the German battleships are also out of action. So not exactly a very, very fun situation to be in from an Axis perspective. But even later in the war, right, when you have Littorio and Vittorio Veneto, right, they're those are the only 2 Italian battleships that can very clearly outfight any of the British capital ships that are available, or at the very least match them evenly, which the rebuilds can't do. And you only have 2 of them for most of the time, and then for a lot of that period of 1941, or late 1940, really through to late 1941. Actually compared to 1942, really, you almost only ever have 1 available because they're constantly trading damage because they were quite active and they were constantly being damaged by something. Littorio was torpedoed at Taranto. Right as she's starting to return to service, Vittorio Veneto was torpedoed during Operation Guado, which is right when the action that led to Cape Matapan. By the time she gets repaired, and there's 2 ships for the summer of 1941, and then you go into the winter. December during Operation M42, which is one of the convoy operations, Vittorio Veneto is torpedoed by a submarine, so she's out of action, which leaves only Littorio until later in early 1942. Actually, no, almost mid 1942, because that's why Littorio is the only 15-inch battleship the Italians have for Second Sirte. And then you get to the summer cycles of battle, and then Littorio gets torpedoed again in one of the convoy battles in that summer. So she's also out of action until later for a couple months. And then, so you only suddenly, so you're back in 2 battleships at the end of the summer. But then that's also past a lot of the decisive phases of the Mediterranean, because now the Americans are involved, and the balance of forces, especially in the air, is just way too much in the favor of the Allies.
Yeah.
And Roma arrives at the end of the year. But so they now they have 3 15-inch battleships finally. But now it's hey, it's November 1942. Operation Torch is happening. The war is at that point in time. When Torch happens is when the Italians at least realize that they've lost World War II for good, and there's no coming back from that.
Yeah.
Germans take a little bit longer to realize that, but it's so in that context, right? You think about it, having at least, even if you only have 2 of the Caracciolo's actually in service, operational, even if it's daggered over the early part of World War II. Let's say it's the same rate as the Duilio, so 1 in October and then 1 in February of 1941.
Yep.
That's still a better alternative, because that's giving you an extra insurance of capital ships to use.
And of course, you do have the other pair, which, yes, they're not as refitted, but they're still there. They can act as a second line in battle if you can find the fuel for them, and
or as a spare parts. You can also use them as spare parts hulks too, because quite frankly, it's one of those things you can do with warships of the same class. If one of them suffers damage, is you can pilfer parts off of them, which the Italians did with the Littorio class. When they were damaged, sometimes they would pilfer in the early part of the war. They would grab a rudder that was supposed to go to Roma. Okay, well that's now going back to Littorio. Or this fire control computer is damaged on Vittorio Veneto. Okay, well pull one that's supposed to go to Impero, because by the time we repair the one for Vittorio Veneto, we can just stick that into Impero or whatever, and we'll just use that kind of swapping happens, and you can do the same thing with the older battleships. So
Dromaeosaurus, the rebuilds, basically Redan Repulse don't want to fight that. The rebuild Caracciolo's that's close enough to parity for the Renan Repulse to not want to take that fight. At all.
I read the Renan Repulse to give it a go. Their machine will gladly pick a fight.
Yes, but against the rebuilt Caracciolo, that's... It's too close of a fight for comfort.
Against
Perhaps.
the war class. Okay, so that is...
They're more willing to fight than necessarily the Italians are.
Well, that depends again on the circumstances. Like when you see the Italians like not be willing to fight, usually it's because they feel the odds aren't in their favor and they really can't afford to lose their battleships. It's kind of one of the big differences, and people compare, say, the way the Germans fought with their battleships versus the Italians. Where the Germans, see the Germans often, commit more, but the Germans could afford to lose a battleship, and it would not compromise their war effort. Fundamentally, their war was not at sea; it was on land, and they were not defending any vital traffic. Bismarck is lost. Oh, well, I guess that reduces our raiding capacity, but big whoop, the British aren't landing on our coast, they're not invading Norway. The problem the Italians have is they need their battleships to make sure they can defend their convoys from British capital ships and deter the British from using capital ships to go after convoys and such, or even just cruiser raids. So if the Italians lose their battleships, they lose the convoys to North Africa, they lose their traffic to the Balkans, and therefore the entire... so you can see why this is important for them to maintain, and so the whole what dictated the use in the war is, can we afford to engage? Because a Pyrrhic victory against the British may end up favoring the British because the British have more battleships and they can build more to replace their losses.
With these 4 ships, you've suddenly radically changed that calculus, because with the 2 older Caracciolos and the other rebuilds, you could suddenly say you've suddenly got you've got a core of ships to engage the Royal Navy, which is the Littorios and the 2 rebuilds. And even if you suffer losses among those assets, you've still got tough enough assets in the form of the unrebuilt Caracciolos and the rebuilt 12-inch ships and the unrebuilt Dulios to go, we can still defend our convoys, you have to commit heavy units to deal with them.
Point out one thing here, though. The Royal Navy is almost certainly going, right, and I have 4 more capital ships, continue the build program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that'll inevitably happen. I mean, look at actually, the British already have, by that point, the Lions in the pipeline. It's just a question of when do they arrive, which in the case of the Lions, I mean, they're cancelled.
Yeah, but they're not going to be this time. They're not going to be this time.
They might not be, yeah. I mean, or it'll be that, or the British will simply devote more capital ships to Force H, as opposed to sticking them up in Scapa Float War with the Germans, or they'll reduce the number of ships that are in the...
There are multiple options for the British.
Japanese. Yeah, the British always have more options. That's the fundamental problem the Italians always have. The British always have more options to reinforce. Italy does not. So any kind of war was always a foregone conclusion.
Our classes are in the med now. All of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe the R class might end up staying up in the North Sea because they're better suited to fighting the Scharnhorst and where there's less of an air threat. That's one of the problems with the R class. They're slow. They have shoddy deck armor. They have very poor AA. And they were just considered a liability in the Mediterranean because the Mediterranean was very high air threat for any British capital ships. That's why, Cunningham's early experiences in 1940, he's like, get rid of these older battleships. Get me the rebuilt Queen Elizabeths. I need more armored carriers. I need more ships with good AA in terms of cruisers and such, because I don't want to be saddled with liabilities because I can't afford to be. Because it's kind of like as we're talking about like Calabria, for example, and the way Campione was thinking at the time when he was fighting. Well, at the same time, the opposite thought process in the mind of Cunningham was, holy shit, I might have warspite with him, but the other 2 battleships are older, and he was looking at the R class he had with him, which I believe was Vermilies at the time, and he was like, if this ship takes a hit, she's gonna have to be left behind, and we're gonna lose that battleship because we can't afford to tow her back, we can't afford to stick around because of the Italian air threat, which at the time was very heavily overrated. They thought that the Italian Air Force was going to be this nightmare of accurate high-level bombing or dive bombing or whatever, and the British were very fortunate that the Italian Air Force was so adamantly against effective anti-shipping methods, or practicing aerial reconnaissance over blue water. But because if they had, this is one of those things where they don't enter the war with any torpedo bombers forces operational. They don't get them until the late summer, and it's originally 5. Then when one is lost in the first mission, 4 Italian torpedo bombers for basically the entire rest of 1940.
Yeah,
it's first opera squadron until 1941.
Oh
But,
my god!
It's a very different story if the Italian Air Force had more than 2 brain cells to rub together that weren't devoted to keeping the Italian Air Force independent and doing nothing with naval affairs. If they had multiple wings of torpedo bombers in 1940 as opposed to only by mid 1941, Mediterranean in 1940 is very different. But again, this is just
very quickly, we're coming up on 9 o'clock, and I am starting to run out of mental steam. My brain is starting to fog up. So I will take one last question. And it's a fairly simple one that is it will leave a little bit of room for discussion. Could the Turks have replaced Yavuz with something more economical? Yeah, actually. I can think of a very easy way to retain that big gun capability without breaking the bank. Buy a Baltimore off the United States.
Oh, it depends on what year it is. But
if they're talking about replacing, it means after she retires in the 50s.
I mean, to be fair, she also wasn't really operational in the 1920s. It could also be that. Actually reminds me, because I was perusing through my university library the other day in a journal, and there was one talking about the Turkish Navy in the interwar period. Apparently, at one point, Vickers made the offer of, we'll build 5 submarines for you, just scrap your Yavuz, and that'll be the payment. The scrap metal, but we'll build 5 submarines for you. Yeah, we're pretty sure it was Vickers. Yeah, it was Vickers.
So now we have we've heard of the Vickers 14-inch gun salesman. Now prepare for the Vickers battleship acquisition merchant.
And submarine salesman.
Submarine for scrap.
Yeah, submarine. You want to buy some scrap?
Considering the fact that Vickers tried to sell Thailand, I think it was a 12-inch armed battleship in the 20s. Vickers were more than willing to sell nuts ships to anyone. There was even some. Apparently,
as long as they thought they could get the money.
It doesn't even have to be limited to ships. Vickers will sell anything to anyone.
Not Afghanistan, Iraq. I think it was Iraq selling a to.
Oh, it's just Vickers. Yeah, literally. That one word, Vickers, and that's all that needs to be said. But yeah, in all seriousness though, if they're talking about replacing Yavuz with something more economical, if it's talking about replacement, that means she's been in service, which means it's the 50s. Honestly, for the capability that they need, if they want to retain that, buy a Baltimore. It'll cost about the same to run and be just as effective.
It's probably cheaper to run, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can just sort of,
post-war, I mean, you say one Baltimore, so it's not going to be enough.
I mean, the only
Seriously, go look at how many Sverdlovs the Black Sea Fleet got.
Yeah, true.
I mean, in that case, then, the thing that replaces it boils down to a single thing, and that's an Alaska.
Do you dare to buy?
No,
I mean,
more
money to operate in Alaska. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I know they can't, but if we're talking about capability,
it's still not enough against that many 6-inch gun light cruisers, dude.
Well, Yavuz isn't either.
Well,
exactly.
I mean, she wasn't a useful asset when she was in service either for most of her time. So
missile boats? Question mark.
Well,
the 50s, they're not ready yet.
Buy a whole bunch of fleet planes.
I mean,
guess.
frankly,
Because the whole point is it's supposed to be economical.
It's by fighter jets.
Yeah,
that works.
Double check what they actually have right around this period. So what actually fits their fleet organically.
Thank God for Phoenix.
Is there still any town class or town colonies?
Yeah, the problem is the British. The problem is the British are using all the good ones.
So I'd say for their fleet around this point in time, what they really could use is just more modern destroyers, because their destroyer fleet is kind of awful.
So trade Yavuz for a bunch of Fletchers?
I mean, 4 Fletchers would do very... Well, actually, what is this? What is the Bristol class supposed to be? What the hell? I hate the naming scheme they use on this sometimes.
Oh no, not the Vicar salesman is back, and this time he's going to offer destroyers.
No, this is okay. So
this isn't Vickers.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say honestly, just throwing throwing 4 Fletchers their way. I mean, that would immediately, the 55 fleet. I mean, that would essentially, that would be a 50% increase in the number of modern destroyers they have. And if you're talking about destroyers with actual dual-purpose guns that can do real AA work, that's twice as many as they had, because otherwise there's the 4 Gleaves that they have. Everything else is older British designed, like British, like pre-World War II derived designs. So.
And I mean, that's still 6-inch cruiser Sverdlovs. Black Sea. Problems.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not a fight they're winning anyways.
Yeah, the Turks were just cooked in the Black Sea regardless. It will make you very happy towards the better disposed towards the Greeks, at least. But
Yep. Right, so that is the last question for today, because Fleet's Head has officially run out of steam. I need new marbles to restock the old brain box.
Alright, we've got some special coal from Sodor we can keep you going with.
No, stop it. Stop it.
To be fair, we don't have to have him to keep going.
Don't worry, Fleet. After all, green for glory.
Right, anyway, thank you very much everyone for coming. There are still catch-up questions, but those will have to wait until next week. Because Friday I may be occupied doing other things.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Just a little bit.
I don't know.
Just a smidgen.
I don't take things for granted. I always hedge, you all know this. But anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Hope you had a great time. I am going to shut the stage down and take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I need 5 minutes. Right. If anyone needs me, I will be in event room 1 after I've had my break.